Hello, dear participants. We are going to show you how to enroll on the FIRKI portal and also how to get the certificate for the conference. To enroll on the FIRKI portal, you have two options. The first one is on the top right corner, you can see create new account. You can click on this one and then you can see all these details. Your username, you can decide any username for this. A password, here you can decide any password. You can see the conditions here, at least 8 characters, one lowercase, one uppercase. Then fill all these details, click on create my new account, then that will be done. So you just need to create an account using that. The other option is, again, I'm just going to the portal firki.co. There you can click on this login. So you can see the again top right corner, you can click on login. And then you can log in using your Google account or Facebook or LinkedIn account. I'm going to use a Google account. I'm just going to click on this. And then using my Google account, I have signed in. So this is as easy as it is, either using create a new account or log in using your Google, Facebook or LinkedIn account. You can create an account on the FIRKI portal. Once you have done this, click on inspirED 2022. On the top, you can see the options about us, what we offer, discussions, resources, inspirED 2022. Click on inspirED 2022. And here on the right side, you can see register now. If you scroll down, you will see all the different conference details. On the right side, you can see register now. I'm clicking on that. Once you click on this, you will see program overview. You can see what is happening in day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4. All the details of the program content also will be here. What are the different events that are happening every day? Keep scrolling down and then click on enroll me. So you need to scroll down on this page, click on enroll me. So I've clicked on enroll me. Once you have done that, it will take you to this page. So you will reach here. This page has all the details about the conference. Again, you can see all the partners who are part of this conference. Here you can see a video. This is an introduction to the conference. And you can see the bigger themes for all 4 days here. Again, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 session details here. You can see first day, we have 6 sessions. Second day, 6 sessions too. Third day, we have 8. And the fourth day, we have 5. So if we click on day 1, click on number 1 here, the first button, it will show you the details of the conference. So for example, welcome to inspirED 2022. You can see the speakers details. So Shaheen and 2 other students will be there. If you click on 2, you can see the second session. To get the feedback, to get the certificate, you just need to fill the feedback form. So as I clicked on the second session here, you can see click here to fill feedback for day 1. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to click on answer the questions. I'm choosing answers to these 4-5 questions. So once you have done this, you can click on submit your answers. So as you do this, you will get the certificate to your registered email ID. So the only thing that you need to do to get the certificate is go to the FIRKI portal, register or log in if you haven't created an account already. Click on the session that you attended. If you attended the second session, click on number 2 for day 1 here. Then you can see click here to fill the feedback form. Please fill the feedback form. Then you will get your get the certificate on your registered email ID. Thank you so much, everyone. Hello, dear participants. We are going to see how to enroll in the FIRKI portal and also how to get the certificate for the inspirED 2022 conference from the app. You can download the app from Play Store. So I'm going to open the app right now. Once you open the app, there are 2 ways in which you can create an account on the FIRKI portal. The first one is in the bottom, you can see create new account. I'm clicking on that. And then you can see all these details, your username, password, email address. Please fill all of these and click on the blue option, create my new account. With this, you will be able to create an account. This is the first option. The second option is you can either log in with Google, Facebook, or LinkedIn. So right now I'm going to log in using Google. So this will help me choose one Google account to log into the Firki account. Yeah, so I've chosen one Google account. With that, I've created a Firki account. Once I've logged into the portal, this is the page that we will see. There are two options, dashboard or site home. So I need to click on site home. There you can see four options: courses, webinars, learning paths, and conferences. I'm going to click on conferences. Then I see inspirED 2022. I'm going to click on that too. Once I click on this, I'll reach this page. Here you can see the option to enroll yourself. So you can see the blue box, enroll me. I'm going to click on that. So it's asking me if I'm sure that I need to enroll into this course. I'm selecting OK. With this, I will be enrolled into this program, into the inspirED 2022 conference program. Yeah. Once you have enrolled into this, you can see this page. Here there is the introductory video. Then you can see overview of the 4 days of conference, the different themes of 4 days, and each day's session details. If you scroll down, you can see day 1 sessions, day 2 sessions with the details of the speakers. So you can see which session you want to attend. To get the feedback, to get your certificate, what you need to do is you need to fill the feedback form. So here you can see, click here to fill feedback for day 1, keynote address session. So I'm going to click on that. It's taking me to this page. Select answer the questions. So there are a couple of questions here. You need to fill this feedback form. I'm going to answer these questions. And then submit your answers. Once I submit this, you will see this. You've already completed this activity. With this, you will get the certificate into your registered email ID. So once you have filled the feedback form, you will get the certificate in your registered email ID. That's
Hi everyone, this is Rituja. Welcome to day 2 of inspirED. I am dialing in from United States of America. I am an undergrad at Lake Forest College, and I have been a Teach for India student for almost 7 to 8 years. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to be at inspirED today and share and learn a lot from you too.
Hello everyone, it's Riya. I belong to the Indian states of Uttarakhand. Currently, I'm studying in class 12th of Nanak Mehta Public School. Since last 2 years, I have been working with CFIX.
So today, our main focus and the theme is about the widened gap within the education system, and we will be focusing on the theme of rebuilding the future. And when we are thinking about rebuilding the future, we are mainly talking about how are we going to get back to the normal living when it comes to school reopening, because now a lot of schools have started to reopen, but at the same time we need to also think about the fact that we have gone through a lot of learning and development losses because of the pandemic, and our children has faced a lot along with the teachers who have been finding it difficult to teach online. So yeah, we will be talking about children and how are we going to rebuild the future within our education system now. So just to highlight a few facts. So this data is basically before the pandemic, and it shows how there has already been a gap even when we did not have COVID, and there was a gap within learning and the kind of things that we did with our kids. So, for example, 50 million children in primary grades were not attaining foundational literacy and numeracy. So, this shows that there has been a loss already, and there have been students who have already been behind their syllabus or their learning compared to the grade that they are in. And just highlighting another fact, which is 3 out of 5 students in rural areas and 2 out of 5 in urban areas of India were slapped, made to stand outside or locked in a room as punishment. You can take like a glimpse of the statistics that are on your screen, but just thinking about, like there has been a lot of gap already, even before the pandemic hit us, and students have been struggling with their grades or even reading or writing. And now we come to this data about the past year. So thinking about how the pandemic has affected the learning and how it has affected the kind of things that have been the changes that has happened because of the pandemic. So 2 times projected learning loss for every month of school closure. So that means that every month that the students have missed learning, they have lost a lot already, because it has been 18 months and there are still schools that are not reopened completely. And it will take 10 years approximately to catch up with all that the students have been missing in the classroom. And an important fact is also more than 7 out of 10 Indian households do not have access to internet. And this has been the main issue, especially when the pandemic was hit and we had to be in our house just learning through our devices. So you can see how it was more about the devices and us and just learning on our screens. And now we come to the projected impact of the loss, or the after the pandemic has hit, what is projected. So 9 million additional children are at the risk of being pushed into child labor globally. So this means that, of course, there has been a lot of issues regarding or learning loss in the education system, but at the same time issues such as child labor has also emerged during the pandemic, and it may continue. And and then 24 million additional children are at a risk of never returning back to schools post-pandemic globally. And this is a big number, thinking about how we want, like Teach for India thinks about visions that all students should attain an excellent education, and then we look at this number and it's more like students are dropping out. So this is disheartening, especially because we want students to come into classrooms, but because the pandemic and the situations and everything that has like the students have gone through has changed, this results in having such a big number of people dropping out. So before we move into the quotes and talk about other students, I would request Ria to share how was it for her to be in the pandemic, like learning.
Thank you, Rituja. Uh, that time, 2 years ago, I was in class 10th, so it was very difficult for me to stay in home and stay motivated alone, because peer learning is something which motivates us and helps us in learning. So, but those times were very difficult and very dangerous. For me, very dangerous, because I was in home and there is not such environment in our homes to study. So it was difficult for me to be self motivated. And I also saw many students around me who didn't have access to quality internet connection, and even the internet connection of my home was also not so good. So it was difficult for me to connect through our mobile phones and stay in touch with screen. So those were difficult times for me too. And yeah, Rituja, if you can share what was your experience and briefly, so then we can proceed.
Thank you, Ria. Yeah, so I was at home. I was supposed to come to the US for my first year, and everything just went online for the first 6 months, and I missed like the first important college experience. And I feel like that affected my social life a lot, because there were interactions, but again it was only talking to the screen and just saying hi to people on the screen, but there was no in-person interactions, and there was no activities, so we had to do everything online. And the second problem was the time difference, because US and India, like I had to be awake the entire night to attend my classes. That resulted in me not really being focused, because I was sleepy and distracted at the same time, and that resulted in me not doing as well in my academics as I wished I would. So those are, like, some of my highlights from the pandemic. Yeah, so now we are just going to go into what other students that we interviewed or spoke to spoke about. So Soumya, who is a grade 12 student, highlights the fact that she wanted to experiment online learning, because it does sound fun for students being like, oh, we are at home and we are learning. But at the same time, after a few months, it was just not what we wanted, or it just was difficult to interact and have that exposure with the students and as well as the teachers. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. Ria, what do you want to highlight?
Yeah. Sohail, who is a grade 10 student, says like it's been a difficult job for the teachers in this world of online learning, but rushing through the syllabus isn't the way out.
Yeah, so this basically highlights, like how it is also on the part of the teachers and the students. So teachers, it being adapting to the new world of online learning, but at the same time, they just rushing through wasn't really helping the students, because we were also part of it. And then another student, Krishna from grade 5, highlights how it was upsetting for him in the beginning, like with everything that was happening with online learning. But one thing that he highlights is um, he did not have a device, and that internet connection will now determine whether I will learn or not. And I personally feel this is a very strong statement, and at the same time true, because that was a situation for so many students who did not have access to internet or a device. And if they didn't, that meant they didn't learn, and that meant that they were falling behind their learning in the classroom.
Advait, who is a UKG student, highlights that school learning is much more fun than the online learning. He says that online learning isn't much fun, and when teachers give them activity and doing it alone, it was very boring, and he cannot make those activities with his friends. So it was not so much interesting for him.
Yeah. So this is how 4 or 6, counting Ria and me, students felt out of millions of students globally, and we are just few, and we can understand on a large scale how it has been impacting students in a lot of ways, not just like being able to attend online learning, but at the same time also now being able to transition to the new normal, which is getting back to our schools and being able to get back to the interactions that we had. So now really thinking about what is it that our children need, and what are we as children are looking for when we are now getting back to our new normal. So we have a few ideas already, or suggestions, where it's like we were highlighting, it's getting difficult to get back to the school and getting back to the normal routine, and at the same time access to mental health experts to overcome anxiety and fear of speaking up, because it has also been shown, even with my experience, that it's difficult to just be around people suddenly and have those conversations as we used to do normally. And so now we will just open up the floor for the audience to share what do they think our children need. And if you could please point a few suggestions and put it in the chat box, we would love to hear you. Anything that you think our children, or whatever you if you're a student, an educator, what do you think your children would need, or we as students, what do you think we really need during this time of rebuilding the future? Yeah, Prem Kumar, he talks about encouragement and support. Shaheen Didi say, and there's also students need safe spaces. Shaheen Didi highlights children need us to ask them what they need, and yeah, that is a perfect segue to knowing what we were going to say. So now we need to listen to our children, and really understand what is it that they need and want. So yeah, there have been, like in the chats it's coming up, like emotional support, whether they need any encouragement, because this is just again new for us. So now this is the time for us to really ask and listen to them as to what is it that they need and want. And yeah, I would thank you again, all of you, for being able to attend this session. And before you all leave, I would just want to highlight a campaign that Teach for India will be doing soon regarding building student voice and agency. So this is a campaign where we will be talking about how you have used strategies or different practices within your classrooms or in your spaces to really listen to your students and know what do they need and want. So if you could take a few minutes to just put in the chat again to think about what were some strategies or practices that you have been using in order to reimagine the role of children, and asking them the question of what is it that they need and want. We would really love to hear your responses. Yeah, Asha Chandran says support them in every possible way to bridge the learning gaps and enhance mental well-being. Yeah, I think that is something very important. It's not only the learning, but also at the same time thinking about their mental health and the development as well. So yeah, thank you again, all of you, for attending this session. I hope you have a rest of good day with attending all the other sessions that are lined up after ours. Ria, any last comments or thoughts?
Thank you, and lot of responses we are getting. So thank you so much to our audience, and that's all about. We can proceed.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Rutuja and Ria, for starting us off on such a fantastic note and sharing your authentic and heartfelt stories. Thank you to our viewers for sharing their amazing responses with us. Our next session today is on the learning gap that we have seen in the past 3 years and how we can move towards bridging it. We have Srihari Ravindranath, Associate Director, Research and Impact at Dream a Dream, to lead this space for us. Srihari is a researcher keen on policy change and advocacy, focusing on evidence based reform in education. Welcome, Srihari. Over to you to begin the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu. I was just listening to these narratives and some of the experience that our kids are actually going through. Just quickly share my screen. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for the kind words, Anu. I think, I'm picking up on some of this conversation which is there in the chat itself, what is something that we are expecting out of our educational system now. It's more about support that the kids would like to have, the emotional support that they are talking about, the more active listening from teachers and other stakeholders, etc. And I think that's a perfect context for me also to begin. So where, when we are talking about rebuilding the future or bridging the gap, it's so something that we are proposing or something that we would like to invite to discuss is more around thriving as the purpose of education. And I'm pretty sure, any of this discussion that we are having today or all these discussions in the last 2 years in different platforms, different forums, we can't avoid, these are some of the keywords that we are always talking about. The challenge that we are facing because of school closures and the learning that moved into online and the whole problem of digital divide, how many of our kids are actually able to access internet or access learning through online modes, and the whole conversation around learning gaps that we are talking about. It could be learning gaps, unfinished learning, or it could be learning loss, etc. And something that we are very sure in the last 2 years is that there is a big crisis in the education system and we are trying to rebuild. And it's also an opportunity for us to see how we can rebuild the education or rebuild the future. And there is an opportunity in that way as well. I also would like to share an experience that I went through, and I think I've been talking about this in different platforms because it affected me a lot, and it also took me a long time to process and move on. Few months back when the school reopened again, I was part of a research study and I visited one of the school in Rajasthan. And before the study, what I wanted to do is just to build a rapport in the classroom as any external person going to the classroom. I just asked them to pick a paper, write your name, and what is your dream? What you wanted to become, something on that, if you can actually write. And I was waiting for them to start writing. And I was just roaming around the classroom, and typically, I'm very eager to know what is happening. So someone who is sitting in front of my class, I was just watching her start writing, and I was just keep on waiting, and she was not writing. So I thought, the question around what is your dream or what you wanted to become is very complex, and probably just to ease that process, I told her, you can even draw something that you wanted to, what you wanted to express, etc. And I can still see that hesitation in her, that she was not able to start writing. She was not able to write her name and anything in that paper. And that was a big realization, and it was disheartening for me to know that it was all around. She was actually recollecting alphabets. She was not able to actually write her name on that piece of paper. And I asked her, have you been into the online classes or any education in the last 2 years? And she was not being part of any online classes, any intervention from anyone in that. area. And that was something that it was not something that I can actually process well. Like, a child who is trying to recollect alphabets to write her name was something that really intensify what we are talking about in terms of learning gaps or the crisis that we are talking about. It also reflects on the process that how much it has affected children adversely. So if we talk about the adverse childhood experience, this 2 years also been a milestone, or it is also been part of their experience in terms of moving with their life. And so from the charts that we are also talking about, the emotional support, etc. So how much it has negatively impacted their social emotional skills. So like as a psychologist, if I look at the trend in terms of clients coming up or parents coming with their kids, they wanted to know how they can actually make the child more proactive, or they can how to tackle these social inhibitions, and the kids who doesn't wanted to be participating in any activities or in any games now. So it's all talking about how the child's social and emotional skills, the gap that we also created in terms of their well-being or their social emotional skills, it's also it's very alarming. I'll say all this have a very tremendous impact on their long life if we are not having a correct intervention or an intervention at this point. And if you look at the other marginalized groups, kids coming, children with special needs, or the kids of migrant workers who moved back to their native, refugees, ethnic minorities who absolutely have not gone through any of this curriculum or any schooling or any classroom intervention, they are kind of outliers to the whole system. And if you look at how serious this COVID learning gaps are, so the whole conversation, the world is talking about learning poverty as another index. And luckily, India is not on the safer side at this point, but this deficit that we have created, or the gap that we have created because of the crisis, we may be we will be going into the index of learning. And I was not very much aware about this story of Sheetal and many that we have actually seen. The loss of learning during pandemic is very alarming. Like the study by Asim Premji, which talks about 92% of the kids who forgot even the language skills, or they also lost the ability to do mathematics, etc. It's something really disturbing. And some of the other reports that talks about over, let's say, around 300 million children have not stepped into any classes for the last 2 years. And imagine a child who skipped her 5th standard and 6th standard is directly moving into a 7th standard. And we are actually going, the education system is more resilient in a way that we are just going with the curriculum, or we are focusing more on the learning outcomes. Did we actually looked at the well-being or the socio-emotional needs of these kids? Did we look at when the child have to go back into re-enter into learning space? Did we also ensure that child's mental health or the anxiety that they are having or the fear that they are also bringing into the classroom is dealt very well? And the whole system that we are talking about post-COVID, we are pretty sure it is basically a K-shaped recovery that we are looking at. And that reality also brings us very distinctively few features. One is there is an absolute disconnect between the role of education and how we are shaping our society. The crisis also bring an emergency or urgency thinking about, the learner's resilience. And did our holistic education or the way we were dealing with education really dealt with the social and emotional needs of kids? And how inclusive and equitable was our education system? And are we planning for a recovery which is more equity-based and inclusive? And what we need to do, when we talk about future of education, or when we talk about how we can bridge the gap, we can't go with an organic ways or organic strategies to deal with this issue. We are really looking forward for a leapfrogging strategies. We need non-organic drastic measures to actually deal with this crisis, because the deficit or the the widening learning gap that we are talking about really need to be addressed at the earliest, or at the as it should be something that we have to deal as an urgency. And learning should also focus, like, it should consider, like, it's a realm that actually talks about loving, belonging, well-being, or care for children. And we also have to shift that mindset in terms of how we think about the purpose of education, why, the what of education, for whom, and what is, and towards what end that we are looking at education. We really need to have a fundamental change in the way that we are looking at education. And our very linear or a very narrow ways of describing success, we really have to redefine the idea of success. It's not just based on marks or grades, or how you perform in the classroom will become the indicator of success. And we also have to do around, like, the competencies which are very localized wisdoms and the context being looked into. So because we have the global awareness that we have to create in our kids, and the competency that we have to create, which are more culturally relevant. And when we talk about what we need to do and how we can actually do that process, some of the ways I think, that I wanted to share here is around, focusing more on learning as a whole being. It should be around more about thriving and universal well-being. So the whole education system for a long time started thinking more in terms of, focusing on subjects, focusing on how we can, how to improve the learning outcomes. Yes, that's all important, but how we are also contributing to the society or the universal well-being that we are talking about. And something in the opening session that we are talking about, the agency that we have to create in children, like, how better we can prepare children for the uncertainties, or what we call it as the world that we are actually going into. And we also have to engage young people, like, they should get in, like, the learning should be experiential, it should be enjoyable, it should be like, they should be part of the call, they should be part of learning. They should be co-owners of learning, we will say. And the whole system that we focus about, grades, marks, and getting a placement, can we broaden the measures of success in life? So everybody thrive in different ways. So getting a good grade, or being successful in life, or getting a meaningful engagement, everything is actually thriving. So can we broaden that measures of success in life? And we also have to look at a very multi-layered, multiple stakeholders involvement when we are actually looking at ecosystem, or creating or designing an ecosystem which is more enabling children to thrive. So it include parents, which include teachers, the ecosystem players, and also like the non-governmental organizations, civil society, leaders in the field of education, etc., coming together, collaborating on trying to understand and redefining the measures of success. And technology, we are talking about technology a lot, how technology can enable or scale some of our interventions, and focusing that, it should not overpower what we are trying to do. It is something that enables us to reach out to people. And how highly personalized or facilitative driven learning environments can be actually created. And the ecosystem, which is not working in silos, it is more collaborative, it is looking from an intersectional lens. It is more from a community driven, like, so there are studies that we talk about, how an education system also expand to community, build the resilience of the education system. And our invitation, as I said, it is more about relooking or reimagining the future of education from the lens of thriving. So what does this thriving looks like, or what does that thriving means to a young person? How an ecosystem or a system can enable thriving, and what happens when we are actually looking at redefining success in terms of thriving. One, the system start the ethos that enable thriving. One is that more acceptance, the kids coming from diverse background, coming from different communities, different stories that they bring in, how system or a school or a classroom is accepting those facts, how much trust that we are able to build between a teacher and and a learner. And the caring adult, like the role of a teacher moving, it's not the expertise in terms of subject matters. It is also about how empathetic or how caring the adults becomes, where you give a holding space or a psychological space. And that space, the classroom, when it becomes a holding space, it is more about which gives an opportunity for learners or students to make mistake, but there is a trust that we are already able to build. There is an empathetic communication that happens between the teacher and the student. So the child is able to make mistake. They are able to make mistakes or challenges, or they can even fail in that system, but they know that there are people who is backing them up or making them more resilient and helping them to thrive. And if you look at the thriving, thriving empowers children. One is they will never give up. We really want our kids to be more resilient. They should be prepared. They should adapt, adjust, and become more resilient to any challenges that they are going to face. They also realize once they are accepted, when there is a trust that we are able to build with the kid, they also realize their own potentials. The area of they understand about themselves. They broaden their idea of self, and operating also from a place of stability. When there is a holding space that we are able to provide, the stories or the experience that they have at their home or their community, which is also being accepted, listened, tackled, or mentored by the teachers, there is also a place of well-being or stability where they can actually think through. It also helps them to manage very difficult challenges and scenarios. When we talk about life skills, we always say it helps children to deal with challenges. And as adults, we know that every day is a challenge, or every day we have to deal with different kind of challenges. How we are actually going to do that and find solutions to the challenges one face. So when we are able to enable a system which is more thriving, and this is what we looks like, when we are able to do that in young children. And what happens when thriving becomes the purpose of education? There will be a connect, a close connection between the real world and the, the society or the way in which we are living. We learn to have more interconnectedness. The experience of COVID also realized that, we work more collaboratively, we try to reach out, we seek help from others. There'll be more interconnectedness that can be promoted. And education obviously becomes more inclusive and equitable, and that works for every child. And when we look at thriving as the purpose of education or thriving as the future of education, we're not just trying to prepare children for the future challenges, but we are also shaping for a better society. We develop an interconnected, intersectional lens in our life, society, and our planet, which means we are not just looking at it, we were looking at a child-centric approach. We also have the larger ecosystem around us. And we also have a planetary system around us. How as a child, I'm also able to connect with that universal well-being, or how much I'm able to relate to a challenge which is happening in the larger ecosystem, like the climate crisis, which is happening around, or the violence or the communal issues which are happening around. How I make meaning out of these challenges, and how I will be able to contribute towards those challenges is also something we look at when we are bridging the gap through the lens of thriving. And our experience, I would say, when we are able to make children, enabling children to thrive, what we realize, they become more resilient. Their inner strength or their grit or their sense of overcoming difficulty and their resilience is built around. They are more responsible. They make responsible decision making, or they take informed choices. And most importantly, we want every child to be happy and feel, which gives a sense of their own better version, how they can actually live in their own terms and be happy with their with themselves and with their surroundings. And my final thoughts, it's around, we need to further explore and articulate as individuals how we can be the enablers, like, we are all educators or working with the education system, how we can further explore and articulate, how as an individual, I will be able to, as an enabler for redefining success and supporting people to thrive. Because the thing that we have seen, we want every child to thrive, or we wanted them to flourish in this world, despite of the challenges and the obstacles or the problems that they are going through. They will be much more happy. They will be much more resilient to deal with this, and they are more responsible towards the society and towards more towards the universal well-being that we are talking about. Thank you so much. That's from my side.
Thank you so much, Srihari, for that insightful talk. Something that I am taking back is the urgency of bridging the learning gap and how it needs drastic measures and strategies instead of waiting for shift to happen organically. A lot of our viewers requested sessions that focus on education in rural India. And so it is with great excitement that I announce our next session, Pivotal Pioneers of Rural India. We have 3 leaders who will share their learnings on hybrid learning models in a rural setup with us for the next half an hour. To begin this space, we have with us Vivek Kumar, co-founder and CEO of Shamatalai Foundation. Shamatalai works towards supporting communities to revive the spirit of learning in schools and outside. Welcome, Vivek. Over to you to start the space for us.
Thank you, Anu, and thank you, Srihari. I think it was a wonderful presentation. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to do a technology check. Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Anu, thank you so much. Just one last, if I want to play something, can you hear the voice? Just can you hear something?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been a challenge for me most of the time. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you so much, Anu, and thank you everyone for being part of this. I just love the name inspirED. And especially when schools have been reopening after almost 2 years, we need a lot of inspiration, and we need to ensure that every child has just not access to quality education, but also access to the just not access, but also the access to quality education is quite important. And the theme that I'm going to talk to you about, how do we revive the spirit of learning, and also share things that we have observed in last 2 years in areas where we work. We work in remote tribal areas of Rajasthan, and the entire theme of this discussion that I'm going to share with you over next 8 to 10 minutes is how do we revive the spirit of learning. Learning itself is such a joyful process, but unfortunately not just in last 2 years, but this has been something that we have been observing over last 10, 20, 30 years, that learning has become task to be avoided when possible. And especially during pandemic, it became more about access and less about engagement and quality. And what we are not realizing that there's a real danger of a next generation of children growing up disliking learning, which is such a natural process for humans, right? Means from day one or even before day one, I think we all are we have a natural tendency to learn things. And if learning becomes such a taxing job, imagine what the future of the education is. And there's something we have been doing before pandemic as well, but we realized that the need of the hour is how do we make children fall again in love with learning. And today we are going to talk about 3 things in next 7 to 8 minutes. Is we realize that there's a lot of talk, and all those who are listening to me, I'm sure you must have come across tons of data around learning loss, and which is true. Children, a large part of India didn't have any access to technology. The place where we work, Kotra, less than 90% people have had access to any kind of digital device. So that's true. And at the same time, we also observed that a lot of traditional roles felt upon girls, right? So you could see a lot of boys playing around. And so when children are coming back, there's a natural tendency, and even during pandemic, whenever we were able to engage children, there's a natural tendency to go for, the recovery of learning loss. But let me be honest, and I'm no ways trying to romanticize things, completely sensitive to, what has happened in last 2 years. That a very interesting thing also happened in last 2 years, that children got a lot of free, unstructured time, and especially in rural areas. The effect of pandemic, it has impacted almost everyone on this planet, but the degree and the nature of impact has been quite different. And the point that I'm trying to make here is the response then to the pandemic also needs to be based on what kind of and what is the nature of impact that has happened. And it's completely different when it comes to rural areas, and even in rural areas, it's different in different contexts. What we realized that even during pandemic, and I'm not sure if you can say we have moved into post-pandemic era, but seems like there's a new variant just around to catch up. We realized that most important function of learning was how do we build trust, and as I say, rebuilding trust and connection, and reimagine community learning, which you must have been listening a lot around making parents as learning partner. Now, there's a different thought that I have on that, right? Because parents already have a lot to do, and how do we make them learning partner? But how, we can create spaces where community learn together, which naturally also happens. But there was a genuine need of making this a lot more institutional during pandemic. And we did this through two approaches, which I'm going to share today. One is a learning festival. It's a 6-day program, basically to revive the spirit of learning, increase parental engagement, and demonstrate what's possible and what's happening. How do you create that tension to create a demand for such things? And last and most important, right, means how do we talk about resilience, right? A word which I'm sure you must have been hearing almost every day and at times overused. But for children, what does resilience look like? How do you provide them the tools and process? And how do you start? Where do you start with? So as I said, it was very important for us to build authentic connections. And that was the core theme of everything that we did, right? We started with radio learning. We started with audio learning, where children can come together and learn, sit in a circle, listen to something, and connect to them and share stories. And as I said, the challenges were different, right? So we can still manage children to come together in smaller circles and what we used to call Hamlet learning circle. But there are 5 what ifs that, in some ways defines our approach in last 2 years in rural India and where places where we have worked. The first is, what if we create a safe space to celebrate risk and failure? Now, there's been a lot of talk around, celebrating failure, but for children, it starts by taking risk from day one. The moment they start going out, the moment they start going to swim, there's an element of risk that they take. Now, how do we start appreciating or developing muscles to appreciate risk? And that we realized was key. And when we do that, this is a very recent video of March Learning Festival. You see what happens here. Now, all the material that you see is locally made. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of knowledge of math that has gone into creating this. But there's also an element of chaos and there's also an element of order. So this is our first design principle around all the spaces that we have created in last 1 year and 2 years. What if children are creating together? Again, when coming back to school, it's important that children get to work with each other, because, in some ways we start promoting individual actions a lot because it's easy to manage and control. What if children are exposed to many streams? In some ways, our focus will fall back on language and mathematics, which are very key skills, right? It allows you to learn new things. It builds your learning muscles. But at the same time, can that happen through exposing children to many streams? Can we move from this idea of mainstream to exposing children to multiple streams? And you could see children are learning, they are drawing, they are making own instruments. And of course, it's important that during this process, they will pick up language, they will pick up foundational learning. And this is one of the things that I also want to share through this, that foundational learning also happens side on side when higher order learning happens. You need to be curious also to get foundational learning. And I see there's a great divide, that there's a lot more focus on achieving minimalistic aims of learning. I think they both can go simultaneously together. This is something that we all who are in education space, agree. So there is no disagreement. What if the boundaries of learning expand beyond the rooms, beyond the classrooms? Children need to be out, and especially when they're coming to classroom after 2 years, it's important that there is a lot more fluidity around how they're spending their time in school. What if they're taught in language they understand? I am talking about the language that they speak at home, but also language of love and connection. Right now it's quite important to rebuild that, because there is certain sense of loss of trust and connection. It's been 2 years. A lot of children in rural areas had not access to any kind of structured learning over 2 years. So there is a lot of fear. Imagine if I'm coming to a space and I'm so scared because I don't know what I will be asked. It creates a lot of insecurity, and I would be averse to that process. So how do we focus on what children have lost during last 2 years, but how do we also focus on what they have learned in last 2 years? And if you look at last 4 or 5 slides, basically we're talking about these 4 values that we feel it's very important right now to inculcate in whatever ways we are engaging with children. We need to encourage collaboration. We need to ensure that children's right to risk muscle grows. We need to create a joyful space, and we need to create equality of opportunities, because there's huge gender disparity that we are seeing. We are also seeing a huge trend in a lot of boys coming back, but the girls are still staying back because a lot of traditional roles got back to them. So this is in short what I wanted to share. And the other things which we did, there's a theoretical framework which we use, is how do you demonstrate quality and joyful learning and at the same time advocate for participatory approach. During the 6 days, there's a lot of group identity that happens. There's a deep dive into different mediums. There are creation days, and then obviously sharing with the community. That's the most important point. When I say community learning, it's not putting the onus on a parent, because they already have a lot to deal with. It's important how they become a part of this process, how they become a part of child's learning process, how they engage with the entire thing, how children can demonstrate what they've been learning in school when they come back to home, how there's a lot more fluidity in school and community, and now more than ever. So this is, in short, it gives a description. And yeah, I would end by this sharing this slide, and if you could read, and this is especially my reflection from the last 2 years. Here you could see a girl going through entire panchayat, taking a functional solar model. A girl who was told that she can't learn. And its most important lesson is that, how do we make learning not a task? And unfortunately, school right now, has ensured that learning is work to be avoided when possible. And our role in coming time is to change that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vivek, for sharing the rich experiences that Shamatalaya has created for children in rural India. A message that I am taking back is that foundational learning needs to happen side to side with higher order learning. Next in this space, we have Meghna Chawla, the founder of Foster and Forge Foundation. Welcome, Meghna. Foster and Forge runs programs that seek to transform the lives of millions of school children by bolstering their education with the relevant life skills to succeed in school and beyond. Over to you, Meghna, to start off this space.
Thank you so much, Anu. Thank you, Vivek. It's always fascinating to listen to you, and the fine balance of chaos and order makes learning very real. Thank you so much. Namaskar, good evening. My name is Meghna, and I represent Foster and Forge Foundation. We work on an in-service teacher fellowship with 3,000 teachers in Uttar Pradesh. Our program is called the Beacon Educator Fellowship. Today, I'm happy to share how we became part of a people's movement in Uttar Pradesh during COVID. The Basic Education Department in Uttar Pradesh is running a campaign called ePathshala under its Education Reform Mission Prerna from April 2020 with the hope that learning can continue for children enrolled in classes 1 to 8. Under Mission Prerna's e-Pathshala, study material has been provided to students and parents in 6 stages through the channels of Doordarshan, Akashvani, and WhatsApp. Also, community Mohalla classes have been conducted successfully by the teachers. Community volunteers, Prerna Sathis, were also inducted during one of the stages of e-Pathshala. As Foster and Forge, we collaborated with our beacon teachers on ground and supported them to implement different phases of e-Pathshala. I would now like to invite Bhavna ma'am, who is a state resource person from Ranpur district, Uttar Pradesh, to share the initiatives in detail. Welcome, Bhavna ma'am.
थैंक यू मेघना मैम। इस वेबिनार से जुड़े हुए सभी साथियों को नमस्कार। जैसा कि अभी मेघना मैम ने बताया है कि हम पिछले 2 सालों में इस कोविड पैंडेमिक के माध्यम से बहुत ज्यादा चैलेंजिंग फेज से गुजरे हैं। उसके इसी दौर में हमारी जो ग्रामीण परिवेश की जो बच्चों की लर्निंग है, उस गैप को कैसे कम किया जाए, इसको डिफरेंट फेजेस में डिफरेंट तरीके से कि कब क्या चीज हम पॉसिबिलिटी है कि जिससे हम ये ओवरकम कर सकें, वो सारे के सारे प्रावधानों को, उन सारी विधाओं को हमने हमारे जो सरकार है उसने पूरी तरह से इम्प्लीमेंट करके हम सभी के माध्यम से बच्चों तक पहुंचाने की कोशिश की है। तो बेसिक एजुकेशन डिपार्टमेंट में अगर ई पाठशाला की बात करें तो इस कोविड पैंडेमिक के जरिए हमारी जो लर्निंग थी वो गैप धीरे धीरे बड़ा होता चला जा रहा था। सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज था कि ग्रामीण परिवेश में हम लोग बच्चों के पास में रिसोर्सेज नहीं थे। उन रिसोर्सेज को के ना होने पर भी कैसे उन तक अपनी पहुंच बनाई जाए, ये एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज था, जिससे कि हम सभी ने मिलकर दूरदर्शन और आकाशवाणी के प्रोग्राम के जरिए उन तक पहुंचाने की कोशिश की गई। जिन बच्चों के पास में, उनके पेरेंट्स के पास में स्मार्टफोन थे, जो रिसोर्सेज अवेलेबल थे, उनको व्हाट्सएप के माध्यम से वो कंटेंट जो था वो भेजा गया। उन पेरेंट्स के लिए, जिन पेरेंट्स के पास में हमारे व्हाट्सएप पे नहीं था, स्मार्टफोन भी नहीं था, हमारे टीचर्स ने उन्हें स्कूल में बुलाकर और कुछ ग्रुपिंग में उनको वो जो कंटेंट था उसको भेजकर और इस मुहिम को जारी रखा। तो ये हमारा कुछ ई पाठशाला से रिलेटेड चीजें थी कि 6 स्टेजेस में क्रमशः धीरे धीरे करके वो किस प्रकार से आगे बढ़ी कि टीवी पर एक पर्टिकुलर टाइम स्लॉट जो था वो हर एक बच्चे को बताया गया कि इस समय निर्धारित पर आपसे, आपके कक्षा से संबंधित जो प्रोग्राम है वो आना है। उस मुहिम में हमारे जो ग्राम प्रधान थे या जो लोकल कम्युनिटी थी, उन्होंने भी बड़ा बढ़ चढ़कर उसमें भाग लिया और उसको एक साथ एक कॉमन प्लेस पर भी कई स्थानों में ये चीज हुई कि एक उनको जो प्रोग्राम थे वो बच्चों तक पहुंचाने की कोशिश की गई, क्योंकि बहुत सारे बच्चे हमारे ग्रामीण परिवेश में ऐसे हैं जिनके पास रिसोर्सेज की कमी रहती है। इससे हम सभी लोग पूर्णतः वाकिफ हैं। साथ ही साथ हमारी जो मोहल्ला पाठशाला थी, मोहल्ला क्लासेस थी, उसको हमारे बच्चे जो थे, जो टीचर्स थे, उन्होंने कंटिन्यू जारी रखा, क्योंकि किसी स्थान विशेष, किसी सुरक्षित स्थान को सॉर्ट आउट करके उस वहां पर हमारे जो ग्रुपिंग में छोटे छोटे ग्रुप के माध्यम से बच्चों को पढ़ाया गया, ताकि ये जो मुहिम है वो रुके नहीं। लगातार उनके जो लर्निंग गैप है उसको पूरी तरह से नहीं तो कुछ तो फिल करने की पूरी तरह कोशिश की गई। फिर हम एक प्रेरणा साथी का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वो बहुत मायने रखता है और बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट रहा हमारी इस पूरी सिस्टम में, कि जो हमारे विद्यालय का जो HM है, हेडमास्टर या जो प्रधानाध्यापक है, उन्होंने ही एक किसी वेल विशर को, किसी स्वेच्छा से काम करने वाले व्यक्ति को आइडेंटिफाई करा कम्युनिटी में से, और उस कम्युनिटी मेंबर को प्रेरणा साथी का नाम दिया गया, जिसके की माध्यम से जिनके पास रिसोर्सेज नहीं थे, जो कि बच्चों को आधे या पौन घंटे का समय दे करके कुछ कुछ ये जो लर्निंग गैप है उसको फिल करने की पूरी तरह से उसमें अपना योगदान दे सके। तो उस प्रेरणा साथी के स्मार्टफोन के माध्यम से बच्चों तक हमारा जो कंटेंट था वो पहुंचाने का काम उसने बहुत बखूबी निभाया। और कुछ स्थानों में इस चीज को बहुत बेहतर तरीके से इम्प्लीमेंट किया गया। ये है हमारा। फिर हम बात करेंगे 100 डेज रीडिंग कैंपेन की, जिसको कि भारत सरकार के द्वारा पूरे देश में लागू किया गया है। जैसा कि हम सभी लोग जानते हैं कि जो स्टार्टिंग के साल होते हैं किसी भी बच्चे की पढ़ाई के, वो सीखने के लिए पढ़ता है, और जो बाद के कक्षा 3 से क्लास 3 के बाद के जो ईयर्स होते हैं उसमें वो पढ़ने के लिए सीखता है। तो सीखने के लिए पड़ता है। तो ये जो चीज है पढ़ना, ये जो स्किल है, ये इतनी ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट हो जाती है कि इसके बिना बाकी सब चीजें जो हैं, पढ़ाई जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल हो जाती है। तो रीडिंग कैंपेन को एक मुहिम की तरह चलाया गया, जिसको कि जनवरी माह से चलाया गया है, और अप्रैल तक इसको गतिविधियों, इससे संबंधित जो गतिविधियां हैं वो हमारे टीचर्स के द्वारा बच्चों के बीच में साझा की जाती हैं। इसमें खास बात ये है कि एक कैलेंडर भी अभिभावकों के साथ भी साझा किया जाता है, जिसमें कि छोटी छोटी सी एक्टिविटीज हैं पर डे के हिसाब से उनको कुछ बताने के लिए उसको एक्टिविटी को मेंशन किया गया है उसमें, ताकि कम्युनिटी को भी एक जोड़ते हुए उनकी सहायता से, उनकी हेल्प से हम आगे बढ़ें। क्योंकि बिना समुदाय के सहयोग के बच्चों की शिक्षा दीक्षा एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज होता है एक अध्यापक के लिए। तो उनको भी जोड़ना एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण पहल थी। तो इस 100 डेज रीडिंग कैंपेन के जरिए जहाँ पे बच्चों को छोटे छोटे व्हाट्सएप के माध्यम से एक लिंक प्रोवाइड कराए जाते हैं, जिसमें कि बच्चे उस रीडिंग कंटेंट को पढ़ते हैं। उस रीडिंग कंटेंट को पढ़ने के बाद में उससे संबंधित स्किट बच्चों से तैयार कराए जाते हैं। छोटी छोटी कठपुतलियां बना करके बच्चे जो हैं, या मुखौटे बना करके उस जो पढ़े हुए कंटेंट को है उसका प्रदर्शन करते हैं। तो ये छोटी छोटी सी एक्टिविटी को पूरा इकट्ठा करके इस पूरी की पूरी जो लर्निंग गैप था, जो पिछले 2 सालों में हम सभी ने अपने आसपास देखा है, महसूस किया है, और उसको कम करने की पूरी तरह से कोशिश की गई है, ताकि हम सभी लोग मिल करके इस पूरी मुहिम को एक जन आंदोलन का रूप दे सकें। तो नई उम्मीदों से रोशन नया सवेरा हो और हर किसी के मन में उमंगों का डेरा हो। तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ में एक जन मुहिम और एक मुस्कान के साथ हम सभी अपने बच्चों का दोबारा से स्वागत करने के लिए तैयार हैं, ताकि वो ये जो लर्निंग गैप है उसको पूरी तरह से मिटाकर हम एक सशक्त भारत का निर्माण कर पाए। ओवर टू मेघना मैम। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, Bhavna ma'am. We have been part of this grand movement all through COVID, and I am very happy to have been part of this along with our team and the Beacon teachers. Thank you, Bhavna ma'am, for sharing in detail all the initiatives. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Meghna and Bhavna, for taking time to join us today and sharing your stories. Mission Prerna is doing some groundbreaking programs, and the 100 days reading campaign is such a fantastic and simple idea. Finally, we have Ravi Dhanuka, co-founder of iSaksham Education and Learning Foundation. iSaksham works with the mission of enabling young women's leadership to solve development problems in underprivileged areas of India. Welcome, Ravi, and over to you for this next part. Ravi, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, I said a few words while I was unmute. I say thanks, Meghna, for passing on the baton and sharing your stories of COVID times. And thanks, Anu, for introducing iSaksham. As you said, the main purpose of iSaksham is to create young women as leaders of change in their communities. Today, I'll be sharing what they did during the periods of COVID, and how it further become a very strong testimony of if you give them a baton to drive change, what is it that they can do in their communities. We all know that the first phase was very chaotic. We all were striving to do something. We also went through a couple of weeks of chaos and confusion, and when we were trying to explore what is it that can work for the communities, for the very backward geographies that we were present in. And we thought, why not check with the parents directly? We picked up our phone and reached out to 500 parents to understand their educational behavior during those difficult times, which are very surprising for the parents as well. And we had some interesting learnings. Contrary to our beliefs, we found out that more than 70% of children, despite the sudden closure of schools, were engaged in some sort of activities. Good, bad does not matter, but they were doing something in their homes. But while their entire wave of EdTech was on throughout the country, we realized that only 50% of our kids, the families have access to smartphones. Forget how many kids could have had an access to that smartphone. So we figured out why not try something that can work in those communities and which also provides an equitable access. So we picked up basic mobile phone as the first starting point, where our edu leaders would just tell them stories over the phone and would do innovative projects. The idea of the telephonic based pedagogy delivery would only be to facilitate what kids can do in their immediate surroundings and context. It would be a mix of activity based learning plus edtech. Is my slide automatically moving? Sorry. Yeah. So it had it had 4 components. We prepared edu leaders. We find out the right digital content for them. We created session plans that was an activity and contextual based, and then we encourage them to engage with parents. And this is some snapshots of how their journey in the first wave turned out to be. For every 2 hours, they continue to engage with children in a group of 5 to 7, would tell them stories and would give them those learning activities which their parents could assist them in their homes. We encouraged elders to continue to engage with kids, share stories, give them those activities that they can do while being in their homes. Post this first wave, while the restrictions eased, we continued with the same philosophy. And here we became more hand-on with the activity-based learning projects. So based on partnerships with other organizations like Education for All, Mantra for Change, and through Mahila Samakhya Network in Bihar, we designed some very small contextual projects which children then started doing it. It was a package of 12 such projects spread over 3 to 4 weeks, and then just a glimpses of what they could do while being in their homes without necessarily being facilitated by a teacher. They created their own books of alphabets. They learned about COVID and necessary precautions. They draw pictures of their body, so their learning continued. This snapshot of how parents begin to help their kids using stories through this EdTech. And we could sense a very high sense of involvement and participation by parents. It was very contrary to a general perception that parents had their own high levels of stress and might be education not their first priority. But once given an opportunity and a systemic access and facilitation support, we could sense it get to know a huge sense of participation. These are some of the testimonials, live on experiences that they have shared. So for example, Lalita Kumari from Bihar saying, मेरे बच्चे अब तो मोबाइल फोन से ही पढ़ते हैं, पहले तो सिर्फ खेलते रहते थे, and I am also learning along with my kids. More than the tech intervention, the entire process also became a story of hope that we can also do something. The services can also reach out to us. While there was a lot of havoc related to delivery of COVID relief services, and there are some children sharing how learning through that project triggered creativity, give them an also sense of participation despite the very harsh external reality. I'm also very happy to share that just a few months after this first phase of COVID happened, we had a national level competition organized by DAV School Chennai and Ticklings Foundation. More than 10,000 students would have participated in that event. And children of our edu leaders got a national level recognition for the project videos that they submitted. So how edu leaders intervened during the periods of COVID lead to such a speedy pace of learning that children started getting recognition for their creativity and for their work. So this is our core learning from the entire exercise. How do you see tech? Tech also needs a lot of contextual understanding and human facilitation to make it successful. We cannot see tech-based interventions only in isolation. And this is how education is all about. It's a social process. Even the use of technology needs the right anchor and how do you employ it. And based on your understanding of the context, you can always come up with innovative solutions. And then this tough times also forces you to be creative and they bring something new in your life journey which otherwise you might not have realized. So for in our case it was more about how such local change agents and how parents could come together to trigger this wide scale change which otherwise as an organization would have taken us some more months to realize the active participation of parents and to trigger this. So this was all from my side, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to share the intervention of I section.
Thank you, Ravi, for sharing your insights and experiences with iSection. Thank you once again, Vivek, Meghna, and Ravi, for leading this session on rural learning for all of us. We now have 3 leaders joining us to share insights on hybrid learning in urban India in the session titled Pivotal Pioneers of Urban India. To begin this space, I welcome Bani Paintal Dhawan, the head of Google for Education in India. Bani has been with Google for over 11 years and her focus is to enable a large ecosystem to impact learning outcomes through Google's products and platforms specifically designed for students and educators. Welcome, Bani. We're very excited to have you here today. Over to you.
Thank you, Anu. Pleasure to be here and a very warm good evening, namaste to all of you. I know we have actually been part of inspirED before as well, and I'm so very thankful to Teach for India to have for having me back again. It's always very delightful to not only be part of conferences that you do, but also the great impact that you're making in the education community. So thanks again for that. So from my perspective, I think, it's been a very interesting year for education. We've all learned, we've all grown, we've all faced difficulties and challenges, and we have come out stronger of it. Being the optimist that I am, my focus today would be on, how do we take all of these positives in India and what we have learned during COVID, how digital adoption in India has increased tremendously, but also there has been some growing inequality. How do we bridge that? There are opportunities and at the same time, there are challenges. Those would be really, really important for us to consider as a group. I would start by, Google's mission in education and what we want to do. Helping every student get access to learning opportunities is what really drives the Google for Education team. And what we mean by that is with digital becoming front and center, or technology becoming front and center, it is very, very important as we move out of just being online to a more blended or a hybrid learning environment to understand what it is that we will do in terms of technology and how do we create an environment that can support each school system, each student, and each teacher. I would emphasize that for Google for Education, our core user is the student. We care deeply about learning impact for that user. And we also believe that teachers are the most important, and in the ecosystem, and they are directors of the learning for this core user called student. But what we have seen during COVID is that parents, school managements have become important as stakeholders as well. Not only about their growing awareness in terms of digital and what is working for them and the choices they want, but just fundamental difference in where we were pre-COVID to now is the acceptance of digital. Is the acceptance that we have all not only continued to learn because of technology and digital education, but also that there are benefits in terms of learning outcomes, there are benefits in terms of productivity, and there is definitely benefit in terms of how future skills are developed in our students. Because more so now than ever before, it is evident that we will all live and work in a digital environment, and digital skills are going to be really important for all Indian students. Now, keeping that in mind, what we really hope to achieve is as this digital becomes much more prevalent in the Indian school system, we want to be able to give access to information so that this information is not only used to transform both the individual and their communities, but more importantly, we're able to support a learning journey from a school to a learning journey at work, and of course, learning for life. So the entire Google for Education suite, or if you look broadly at Google overall, our intent would be to help everyone in the world learn anything in the world. So what does that mean for schools, higher education institutions, etc.? We want to provide every student and teacher a more personalized learning environment. We've already seen that during COVID, that it supports different learning needs. We also want to be able to design and deliver differentiated and engaging learning experience. And how we do that is through our platform called Google Workspace for Education. And we also are working very hard, and this happened organically when teachers got together and created digital content. But Google on our side as well, we're working very hard to enhance and elevate class content with a host of education resources. I would highlight that one of the biggest or most important takeaway that we have had as Google for Education during the last couple of months or years has been that language learning is very, very important. Focusing on each student's native language, the kind of experience that they have, their context or their school system is super important. And technology is an enabler. So technology needs to fit in to that environment, not to be standing alone or not to be an element where we say that technology can solve any of these problems. And the second critical pillar is that we have to do a lot of change management or transformative work with teachers to be able to get acceptance and adoption for these digital technologies in classroom. So that's the other focus that that Google focuses on, and we continue to do so. How are we doing this? Worldwide, we have over 180 million users using Google Workspace for Education and over 150 million using Google Classroom. Google Classroom has become the default destination as a learning management system for a lot of school systems in India as well. And what we are doing increasingly is to innovate within to provide more local language interface and to be able to support Indic languages. And finally, we also believe that the important piece of the puzzle that will need to be solved is access devices. Just as important the platform is to host this amazing content, it to be language specific and curriculum specific, access, whether it's in the form of what we have as Chromebooks, which are shareable devices, or in terms of tablet form factor is very important. We believe as Google that The idea should be for India to move away from just being consumption devices to more a creation-led environment where project work is happening, where teachers are sharing information in the formats like video formats or assignments or collaborative projects, so that each of these learners contribute and also take away and learn. And that's possible if we are able to solve 4 important pillars, as we call it. One is access, which is providing content and devices to student. Second is content, where we not only have specific language content, but also curriculum map content that is interactive, that is personalized, that is relevant in the context of the student and the teacher. And the third pillar is that we build teacher capacity. And this has to be done at scale. We currently have a partnership with CBSE where we are committed to train 1 million teachers in India. And we have really strong adoption from this program. And we are hoping that with Teach for India as well, we're able to grow that ecosystem. We also believe that learning happens where life happens, whether it's at home, in a class, or anywhere in between. So that's why it even becomes more important that we are able to use technology in whichever situation we are in or whichever format we are in. I think that's one thing we all have taken away as well. I'm going to do a time check, Anu. Am I on time? And if you could just let me know how much more time I have.
Hi, yeah, I'll message you in a bit.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the idea would be then that as we see this, fundamental shift in learning and how students learn, how teachers have adapted to this new learning environment. What was really interesting to us during COVID was that we did a research report with BCG that said that the positive impact on digital tools on teaching and learning is tremendous. And we heard that up to 60% of teachers reported that Google for Education technologies were creative and innovative. And what do we mean by that? One of the most interesting points that we hear very often in the student community as also the school communities is that, how is AI used to actually enable more interactive or real learning experience? For Google, this is a fundamental challenge we would like to solve. And what we have done as a start is we've launched Read Along, which is an AI-based assistant which has an AI-based assistant called Dia that helps primary grade students learn, languages. And we've been able to work with various state governments as also with central government to enable that experience. So there's an AI built that actually, that Dia actually encourages a child to not only read, but also has a reward system that encourages a child to take more complicated words, will be able to read back to the child. And that experience is very, very important, especially in certain demographics where we have first-time learners. And the second innovation that we have done, which we're very, very excited about, is we have launched a beta on Practice Set on Google Classroom, where we are able to provide an assistive learning experience both at the student side as well as the teacher side. And how that works is that you're able to convert an assignment in a format that is easy to collaborate. And when a student works on that assignment or is part of their homework, we actually suggest YouTube videos that are relevant to the topic. And we also support them in like other sources of learning that they will may be able to be able to utilize when they are actually answering that assignment and submitting that assignment. On the teacher side, why this system of practice sets would really help is because the teachers are then not only relying on an environment over 1:many, but the student is supported and a teacher can actually leave comments and also resources on top of what has been already shared. And they are able to then get learning analytics out of how the child learns. What can they do more? What is the kind of format that the student really is interested in for a particular concept? So again, these are These are great innovations that are happening within our platform, and we know that it is making a difference to the teaching and learning environment in Indian public or government school systems. And also, one of the interesting things that we hear very often is now that we are back at school or in our in transition phase, how much of these tools will be utilized. And I would say that, we've had very, very disruptive years, and disruption leads to innovation. So if you ask me, if we do not use this opportunity where we've all had a very disruptive, school learning experience and come out stronger by adapting and continuing to do some of the best practices, we would fundamentally lose out on not only the progress we made, but also what is in store in the future. So I would highly recommend that each school system picks the kind of learning experience that they would want using technology and continue to use that as schools reopen. We have several examples in terms of our reference schools, and we also encourage you to find a reference school, Google reference schools in your ecosystem, and see how you could actually work with them. I would say that, when we are thinking of the national education policy, we talk about student-centered learning, enriched feedback, personalized attention. Technology is enabling a teacher to do that while being super productive herself or himself as well. We also, highly recommend that digital has evolved from being just a stopgap arrangement to a more long-term strategy. We know that, in our BCG impact assessment, we found that 82% of educators predict that combining technology with traditional teaching will be the most likely trend over the next 3 to 5 years. This is very, very important. As we think through, like I said, transitioning back into school, how you incorporate technologies would be really, really important. We want to be able to support every leader, every educator, every student, and every parent, to evolve learning to be more transformative and to be more personalized. And we are happy that all of our products support that. So with that, I'm going to open the house for questions, Anu, or hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bani, for sharing these profound learnings with us. Something that stood out to me is the vision of helping anyone in the world to learn anything in the world and the role technology will play towards that. We won't have any questions as of now, so we can move to the next speaker. I welcome Sanjay Dalmia, CEO and founder of Open Links Foundation, to continue the discussion on education in urban India. Open Links Foundation empowers teachers with high-quality lesson plans, activities, and resources aligned to curriculum through an open platform. Welcome, Sanjay. Over to you.
Thank you, Anu, and thank you, Bani. It was a pleasure listening to all the thoughts. So, I had a very interesting question which came to me from one of the teachers, and I was talking about blended learning as the way forward. And the teacher asked me, "Sir, are you sure blended learning is the way forward?" And I was a bit taken aback, and I said, "Why do you have that question?" And this is from a big school in south of India, big prestigious school, where technology was not so much of a problem. So she said, "Sir, everyone is so happy to come back to school. The children are excited, the parents are excited, the teachers are excited, the school principals are excited. So why do you think that, blended learning is the way forward?" So that was a good question. The question was, are we going to return to the old normal? We had a new normal during COVID where things were very different. And what is the way forward? And we had an interesting discussion following that conversation. And what I will do is I will share with you my experiences, our product journey, to highlight what I think is the way forward on blended learning. So I will share my screen. I will use my presentation to talk about our work. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so The question is blended learning, is it a way forward? We are Open Links Foundation. We started our work in 2016. We are supported by DAV Chennai, IIM Ahmedabad alumni. We focus on making education fun and relevant, and in particularly 21st century education that we are all excited about. What is 21st century education? The NEP talks multiple times that it is multidisciplinary and holistic. So that means, it is arts integrated, story integrated, value integrated education. And that means that teachers need to be better prepared with good activities, good stories, good worksheets, good videos, real life applications, backed with good pedagogy, new methods of assessment, formative assessment, summative assessments, etc. Lots and lots of requirements on what teachers should be prepared with as they go into the classroom. But at the same time, having worked in this sector for 6 years now, I understand that teachers are really busy in various ways. In government school, they are busy with different kind of work, but they are really busy. And in private schools, they are busy with, again, many different types of work. And class preparation normally takes the back seat. So what is it that we are doing? We are doing three things. We are providing teacher support, teacher engagement, and teacher motivation. So these are the three things that we are doing. What does teacher support mean? We provide lesson plans, unit plans aligned to curriculum, clear learning outcomes, aligned with NEP 2020, with activities, with worksheets, with case studies, stories, so that teachers, when they go into the classroom, they have a fair amount of content without having to search the internet for content. And they are prepared. And of course, they must customize all this content as they go into their class. We have over 10,000 lesson plans for CBSE and 8 other state boards. And we have now this in 3 vernacular mediums, English and 2 other vernacular mediums, Hindi and Marathi. So this is the first thing that we do. I'll quickly give you a snapshot of what this looks like. So, this is all the TLM. So here the teachers can choose their board, they can choose their class, their subject, their medium of instruction. And when I go into third EVS, I can see all the chapters as are there as per my book. I can go into the chapter, I can see how many periods are required to complete this. And when I go into one of the lessons, it gives me a clear learning outcome, and it tells me how do I start the class, what activities I can do in the class, and how I can make my class interesting. So this is, how we are supporting the teacher with good quality content as they go into the classroom. So this is one of the things that we are doing. But, when we did this, we realized that this is a change in mindset. We may be giving very good activities, we may be giving good case studies, we may be giving good videos, but this means that the teachers have to do more work. When they go into the classroom, they have to possibly prepare now for a discussion, they have to prepare the activities, and the content consumption in general across various platforms, whether it is Diksha or whether it is some other platform, has been low. And we said, this cannot be the only support that we give to the teachers. We also need to engage the teachers to make it easy for them to share their work, to make them feel like coming to the platform so that they can get motivated to come to the platform. So teachers are given various opportunities of sharing their TLMs, their experience, their teacher stories, their club activities, and they can also connect with other amazing teachers. So, this is what teacher stories page looks like. The teachers can add their stories directly here. They can put their projects that they are doing with Maths Club, Science Club, Arts and Crafts Club, or Proud India Club.
Hello, Sanjay? Sanjay? Hello, Sanjay. I think Sanjay's video has paused. We will take a 2 minutes break and be back very soon.
You hear me? Am I back?
Yes.
Okay. Teacher engagement, and that is the second part, which is very important to engage the teachers. Here, the motivation for the teacher, one is the simple likes that come from fellow teachers and the teachers whom I am connected with. This small social recognition is very important, because once I put something, I am looking for some recognition from my peers, from maybe students, to recognize my work, and that becomes an important motivation for the teacher. The other thing is, as a teacher also, as I work on the platform and as I contribute, my own portfolio gets built up, so I can see, what are my posts. All my posts can also be seen by others. As a mentor teacher, how I have supported my students, thank you notes that I have received from the community. So these are the portfolios that gets built up as I work on the platform. There are other motivations like post of the month, post of the year, 21st century educator, and there are these are at a school level, at a cluster level, at a block level, at a district level, to recognize the work that is being done by the teachers. So why is it important? It is important because it is not sufficient to give content to the teachers. We need to engage the teachers. It's a change in habit that we are seeking at scale. How do we motivate the teachers to use the platform, to use the content and change their methods of teaching towards a more 21st century education? So that is what we are doing to engage the teachers. This is one case study where we are working with Pune Zilla Parishad schools, almost 3,700 schools, and creating a two-way communication between the diet, the education department, and the schools. So the key objectives are listening to the teachers, teacher training, calendar and events, weekly plans. So various ways in which the communication happens apart from support. We are also working with Bharti Foundation, where they have their own schools in 5 states, mostly village schools. They also work with about 700 government schools in 11 states. So again, various ways in which we engage the teachers, engage the students, and work with the system to create the adoption. So, 3 things which are important, and above all, one of the things which we heard was that most of the platforms are talking to the teachers. So we are giving content, we are talking to the teachers, but we are not, giving them an opportunity to talk and present what they are doing or create a conversation. So the things that we are doing are teacher engagement, teacher motivation, teacher support. We work with NGOs, partners, government, and also with schools. So that's what we are doing, and we would love to, have your thoughts on the chat box, and Love to work with more schools and partners. So if you're interested, do get in touch with us at contact@ticklinks.com. Thank you, Anu. I know the time is up, and over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay, for sharing all your wonderful experiences. I agree with you that along with content and curriculum, mindsets also need to be nurtured. And it is interesting to see how Open Links is trying to engage and motivate teachers. Up next, we have Ria Handa, Project Manager at Central Square Foundation. At CSF, Ria drives research and evidence generation agenda for EdTech for foundational learning. Welcome, Ria. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Anu, and thanks so much to the TFI and Filky team for having me. I'm really excited to be here to contribute to the discussion. I'm so glad Bani and Sanjay talked a lot about teachers and how to engage teachers, because I'm going to move a little bit away from that. Today, I want to talk a little bit about innovation in EdTech that can catalyze communities, parents, and learners as agents of change. I'll start by setting some context on why EdTech and the opportunity in urban India. I'll move a little bit to talk a little bit about what CSF is and what CSF's EdTech team does. And then I'll talk a little bit about the promising innovations in India and some of the really cool partners we've been working with over the last year and how they've leveraged some of the change agents that I've just mentioned. So very quickly diving into EdTech, right? What we've seen is that EdTech has huge potential to address key gaps in the education system. So for example, in a multi-grade, multi-level classroom where there's a large diversity in learning levels, you have use cases such as personalized adaptive learning with a lot of evidence behind them to help remediate children to the right level. Similarly, at home, where parental education levels and awareness is low around engaging with their child's education, you can have parent-focused tools that build parents' capacity to meaningfully engage in their child's learning. So with this sort of evidence-led mindset, we also looked at the opportunity. And what we see in India is that there is great opportunity for EdTech at home, right? We have smartphone penetration like never before. We are set to have over 1 billion smartphone users by 2024. And a large chunk of that is urban penetration. So the opportunity in urban India is quite big. But I think, there are still some key challenges that remain. So one, we have a lack of solutions for the K-12 space that are available in vernacular languages. There's limited exposure amongst parents, students, and teachers on the potential for technology for learning, though that has changed a lot since COVID. And there's also limited awareness and capacity for governments to implement EdTech effectively and hence take EdTech to scale. And finally, despite some of the evidence that I just talked about globally, there is a lack of evidence of what can work in the Indian context and how, which is something that I work on quite strongly at CSF. So CSF's work in EdTech is geared towards addressing some of these key challenges. So, one, we work with high quality EdTech solutions to take their solutions to the low income sector in partnership with us. We develop iterative evidence. So we work with some of our partners to generate a body of evidence on EdTech in India, on how EdTech can work, what EdTech can work, and whether it can work at scale. Third, we help states adopt EdTech. So we increase salience for EdTech uptake and help provide support to government EdTech implementation. Finally, through all of this work, we also create public goods for the larger ecosystem to have evidence on EdTech, to share what works, and then to build playbooks and toolkits for EdTech to scale. So in this context, I'll quickly jump to the three levers that I want to talk about today. So, Bani and Sanjay, like I said, talked about teachers, but really I think the three key agents that we've identified through our work over the last few years is one, communities, engaging communities to create support systems for parents and families and students. Second is parents. So engaging parents is almost a second teachers, a role that they've had to assume over the last years to improve engagement and learning. And finally, look at learners, engaging learners in play-based interactive experiences to help improve engagement and retention and learning over time. So I'll call out some of the really interesting partners we've been working in this space. First up, we have Sarthi, which leverages communities and brings them together towards a shared goal of learning for children. So in addition to some of the high quality content that they share through daily worksheets, they have a really strong involvement of the community in the form of relationship managers. And these relationship managers really provide a lot of motivational and pedagogical support to parents in order to help them engage more meaningfully. They also use technology to create feedback loops, to disseminate these worksheets, and to track key metrics on student learning outcomes. And what this really achieved towards the end is, parents are supporting their children at home and engaging with their child's learning. B, children are practicing at their own pace and at their own level. Finally, that almost leads to the long-term outcome of confidence in parents, capacity of parents to have a positive attitude towards education in the household. And then daily practice through these incremental worksheets allows students to gain mastery over concepts. So I really like the way, Sarthi has brought communities together, and I've seen some of the spillover effects that Sarthi has been able to have in the form of, livelihoods, in terms of financial empowerment, in terms of empowering a lot of the women in the community. So we've, had, when I visited the field a couple of weeks ago, we did see, mothers come and say that I could never even talk to someone, and now I'm able to do that. So I really, it's really interesting to see how they've brought that community together over technology to be able to enable their children to learn. And fun fact, Sarthi was actually started by a TFI alumni called Ankit Arora. So it's one of my favorite sort of community-based solutions. Moving on to parents. So we have Rocket Learning, which leverages parents by building their capacity to be meaningfully and actively involved in their child's learning. What they do is essentially you leverage parent-teacher communities. So they build parent-teacher communities where they share really high-quality activity-based learning content. They use sort of social influence to get parents to engage with their children, but also to engage in these communities. And then using technology, they are able to provide instant feedback to parents on how they are doing and how their children are doing. What this eventually leads to is, one, parents have the aspiration and motivation to engage with their children at home, and they're conducting regular learning activities and engaging with their child, which has evidence to show long-term learning outcome improvement. Finally, in the long term, what this means is that there is a lot of family support for education, and that is what leads to learning outcomes. There's long-term change in parental knowledge, attitudes, and practices towards education. And finally, there are spillover effects on learning and parents' participation in school. So with this sort of, virtual communities, what Rocket Learning has done is really started working with a lot of municipal corporations to build some of these communities and then share a lot of this activity-based content to help students learn. Finally, we have Chimple. And Chimple, I think, is a special one for me. I work very closely with them. Chimple puts the learner at the center of the learning process and leverages sort of the playfulness of children to help them learn in a really fun and interactive way. So they almost have a two-pillar approach. One, they engage the child in a game-based learning experience. So they have a set of games that are aligned to curriculum to help the child actually learn. And two, they also involve learning agents very meaningfully, which sort of brings together my whole presentation in some ways, in which you can leverage parents, you can leverage teachers to be able to help the child learn. So they have insight into how the child is learning, how the child is performing on these games. And I'm also able to assign specific activities for the child to do. Throughout all of this, they create a monitoring and feedback loop to capture the user's journey and enable continuous iteration on their solution. So they are able to build new product and programmatic features to be able to improve learning outcomes over time. I think, the three solutions that I talked about, I think one of the most interesting things about them is just the way they are able to generate engagement in some ways, right? You see a lot of high response rates, you see a lot of high engagement from children, and, the spillover effects on the community, on the parents, on the learner, but also the teacher and the wider school community is honestly catalytic. And I've had such a great time working with these organizations. I'm so happy to highlight their work today. I think I'm at time, so I'll pause here. Thanks again to everybody.
Thank you so much, Riya, for sharing about Sarthi, Rocket Learning, and Chimple. We have posted all these links in our chat, so I request users to go and check all of these various sites later. And thank you once again, Bani and Sanjay, for joining us and sharing your terrific stories as well. We will now take a 2 to 3 minutes break and be back with the session. experiences with teaching preschoolers and how they bridged the learning gap for them. Tejasvi is a transformational teaching fellow and is working in partnership with her class teachers to develop a Montessori classroom in a low-income private school in Chennai. And Sagar is a transformational teaching fellow and teaches nursery and kindergarten children in Delhi. Welcome, Sagar and Tejasvi. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So welcome everyone to our session. I'm Sagar Ahuja, a 2019 Teach for India Fellow. I taught 9th and 10th grade for 2 years during my fellowship in Selampur, Delhi. Post my fellowship, I joined Transformational Teaching Fellowship and chose to teach elementary grade as I saw a huge learning gap in my secondary students. They could not understand English and were 5 to 6 years below their grade level. They could not understand basic concepts of other subjects as well, which I was teaching, that was science and social studies. About 50% of the students lacked in expressing their voice and didn't have that confidence to express their thought. I strongly felt that if things would have started with them in early stage, the scenario could have been totally different. I will be very honest with you all. I never expected, not even in my dream, that I will get opportunity to teach nursery and KG grade, as Teach for India intervened from first grade onwards. I was really afraid about managing 3 to 4 years kids, that too at online setup. But it was an amazing experience to teach these kids of SDMC Government School of Lajpat Nagar, Delhi. And today I'm here to share some of my highlights from this journey. Over to you, Deju.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Tejasvi. I'm from Chennai. Next year is going to be the 5th year of me working with Teach for India, Chennai. I started my fellowship in Chennai in this school called Vidyaniketan, which is a low-income private school. I did grades 3 and 4 in my fellowship, post which I did the piloting of grade 1 with Teach for India Chennai. During that time, I was involved in a kindergarten project for the development of phonics, helping the teachers and children in the kindergarten classroom. So I got a chance to interact with the kids of that age, with the teachers, all of them. And I also, when I was doing grade 1, I also thought that I wanted to try some concrete math with the class. So I went on to look for some videos and I happened upon Montessori there. I tried a lot of concrete based mathematics in my classroom with my children. And that's when I thought it's a good time for me to go equip myself. And I went on to do my higher studies and to do from Association Montessori International, which we call it as AMI. I did my training. I'm specialized in the 3 to 6 years age category. And post the course, I wanted to come back to the school that I was working in and convert the kindergarten environment there into a Montessori environment. So going forward, we hope to have Montessori environments in the school, which was which used to be the kindergarten classrooms. And we are in the process of converting the kindergarten environments into a Montessori environment, with Transformational Teaching Fellowship being an enabler for that. I look forward to share my moments in the journey so far. Thank you. So to start off with, I think I want to share on what are we here today for? Like, why we have chosen this particular piece of taking parents as stakeholders. So to start off with, I just want to share a small story. So I came across this child who was in my neighborhood. So that child was 3.5 years old. And so that child, he used to come to my house almost every day. And he did not come to play with a toy or ask me for my mobile phone or things like that. But all he would do is come and go to the water dispenser in my house, and he would want to open the dispenser by himself, fill water, ask for a glass and fill water by himself, and close it. He used to do this several times, right? He used to open, close, fetch water, drink it, keep it back. He used to constantly do this, repeat so many times. And I was very curious, like, of course, right? Like, there's nothing like water is not available in his house, or it's not like the parents don't give him water, or he's not going to drink it there or something, but something that brought him here. Then when I had a conversation with the mother, with the parents, I then came to know that that particular child was not getting the kind of opportunity to open the tap by himself, to open the dispenser by himself, to turn it, to fill it, and to drink it. It was all not, he was not able to do it by himself. And he was not given that opportunity there to, like, to refine his movements, or to build himself, or for him to be able to do it by himself, for him to be independent. So then I figured that maybe that's why he wants to come here and keep drinking water as many as times that he wants. And that's when I thought of, like, how, if we can go about changing what the parents think, how it'll be if the parents understand the child better. So I, in fact, set my goal in my year 1 to only work with parents. And that's why we are here to share some of our moments with our parents.
Now let's meet Abu Hamza, one of my little 4-year KG grade student and a first generation learner from his family. When I recall July 2021, I remember him never speaking to class or responding to anything which was asked. He was regular in online classes, but never used to submit any worksheets which were sent as a post work or videos which were asked to make. On asking his mother, she shared, "Sir, हम कहाँ इतने पढ़े लिखे हैं, जो करना है आपको ही करना है." Means that we are not qualified and skilled enough to support our kid in studies, and it's all teachers' responsibility. And sadly, this was the similar situation for about 70% of my students. Not just during the lockdown, but also in general, parents of these communities have this feeling of not being capable enough to support their kids in studies. How might teachers and parents work as equal partners for the holistic learning and bridging the gap? This was the big question we both were working towards during our last year journey.
So one of the strategies that we used with parents was build relationships with parents and between parents. So what did we do? We started off with orienting the parents, orienting them to the idea of the early years education. What did we exactly do? We, in those sessions, we made them made them understand that as adults, what we all have to do is just follow the needs of the child, rather than imposing what we think that the child of that particular age must be knowing. And we also met the parents very often, at least thrice per week, in small groups, and we discussed with them the ideas, just talk to them about the child, about what the child's routine, about what are the different things that the child is interested in, and how can we as adults help the child, how can we help his development of, and what are the powers of this child. So very simple topics where it is more not like lecturing, but an interaction, because they deal with children every day, right? Like day in and day out, they deal with children. So it was more like interaction. What do you do at times when the child does something like this? What do you see the child do this? So those were the questions that we spoke about in our conversations with parents. And we also got parents to come and see the space that we've created for them in our classroom, for them to come and look at it, for them to know what actually we are, what is our goal and what are we moving towards and what are we all creating together. So we bring them to the space, make them sit, have a look at the space, have a look at how and what our day looks like, spend time with us. So these are some of the things that we did to build relationship with parents.
And building capacity in parents to support their child's learning at home. So video resources were created both for parents and students. The main focus of these videos was to guide parents and students and providing them a space to understand the content which was covered in online classes and practice it with teachers. These resources were easy to understand, easy to use, and most importantly, enjoyable. They also help students who were not able to attend online classes because of non-availability of devices at the time of class and bridge the learning loss for them. Parents were guided through PTMs and voice notes on how to use these resources. So in PTMs, we used to show them these videos and tell them how to use it. First, the content was covered in the class. Then this video was sent to parents and they used to practice the content. And then after that, they used to practice it with students. Here's a short glimpse of a video where parent is supporting her kid.
1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8
Something that's very close to our hearts, very beautiful, was the regular feedback that we get from parents during our one-on-one check-ins, where we only meet parents individually and seek feedback, listen to them, just give them our ears, and it's just the time for them to talk openly about the child's education or whatever they need. So there were very beautiful moments where like you can see on the screen, where the parents also given feedback and how the parent also talks about how very beautiful big topics like how education is very important for the child and how can we support the development of the child. And we take the feedback and we try to incorporate it in our online classes, because that's when we started. We note it down, and when we plan for the class, we try to incorporate that. So these one-on-one check-ins definitely built like a personal bond between us and the parents at a very like a huge level. I think this was like a base for the trust that they have on us and for the support that they give us and for being able to cooperate and understand the child better. So this particular session, I think helped both us and the parents to go in depth and understand each other better and the child better.
Now let's see how working together in partnership help students, parents, and us to grow. So parental investment increased from 20% to 85%. This includes parents being active on WhatsApp group, parents consistently dedicating time for supporting kids in their studies, parents being regular in getting post work done from kids, communicating growth of students and areas which needs spatial attention. As a result of this, attendance and engagement in online classes increased from 15% to 60%, and work submission post classes increased from 10% to 70% within the first 4 months of our intervention. This is a thought shared by mother of Nandini. सागर सर के वीडियोस मजेदार और आसान है और उनकी मदद से मैं भी अपनी नंदिनी को पढ़ा पाती हूँ. Means that the videos which are shared by Sagar sir are really interesting and easy, and with the help of these videos, I'm able to help my kids.
I think the next shift that we saw, I would like to call it the conquest of independence in children, where the children feel more confident when they are independent, right? And when children feel that they are capable of to do something, when children feel that I'm able to do things that people around me do. So we sort of recorded children's independence. You can see the table here at regular intervals. We did that. And this is a video of a child who at home chooses to do some of his own things and chooses to help few things that he can do. So things like he arranges or sorts out the utensils. And being able to cook a meal or help prepare a meal. Being able to dry out his own clothes. And preparing his own bed. And serving the meal for himself.
Now let's watch another video. Can you all recognize this vibrant and joyful child? Just listen to the ring in his voice. This is our own Abu Hamza, who was an epitome of shyness, now facilitating a poem for 5th grade students. Because of his interest in learning and reciting poems, Abu has shown a remarkable progress in accurately understanding and using sounds and phonics, and reading 2 and 3 letter words confidently. He have also shown increase in other student vision indicators such as confidence, creativity, collaboration. And this is not just the story of Abu Hamza, but about 80% of students have shown this kind of remarkable growth through our work.
So what are we learning through our work to bridge the gap? I think what we are learning is I think it's a two-way learning, meaning we learn from parents and the parents learn from us. So when we learn from parents, what do we learn? We learn more about the child so that we all together can help the child in learning better.
Also, I started with a hunch that and my last year journey has completely validated that if we start with kids at early stage, it could be an amazing experience and could be a huge step to undo the educational inequity we have in our country. Also, creating a structured structures and resources for both parents and students can work wonders, as parents have limited education and don't understand English language. So these kind of resources can do wonders, and you can see how this have helped in the growth of students. So with this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sagar and Tejasvi. It warms my heart to see all your passion and hard work leading to such incredible results in your classrooms. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. It means a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay. We are now moving to our final session for today, a panel discussion on bridge curriculum, where we will discuss the implementation, impact, and learnings from the bridge curriculum. To facilitate the panel, we have with us Gayatri Kulkarni, Regional Training Lead at Teach for India. Joining her in this panel, we have 4 Teach for India fellows, Riddhi Samarth, Mekhila Uchil, Shreya Singhal, and Aparna Sanjay. Welcome everyone. Over to you, Gayatri, to start the panel.
Thank you so much, Anu. And it's so exciting to see all the learning that is being generated today. It's an incredibly important theme that we're also exploring. So I'm looking forward to learning from these 4 amazing teachers on the call over the next half an hour or so. Before we just hand it over to hear from all of you, what I'm going to do is take the next 5 minutes or so and walk our audience through what Teach for India's bridge curriculum actually intended to achieve, and what were some design principles we kept in mind, right? So to everybody who's watching, we know you've been exploring the idea of just the learning loss that our children have faced over the pandemic. You've been talking about what kinds of learning loss also happened, and it was not just academic. What are some skills that attritioned due to the 2 years of school closures? So you've been exploring that. Stay with those thoughts as I'm going to quickly share my screen. And we will go over just 3 big things in the next half. Why did we implement the bridge curriculum? I will build off of everything that you've all already explored over the last couple of hours. What were the principles that we used while designing this curriculum? And then these 4 beautiful teachers on the call are going to help us decode just our learning from that implementation, right? What were some of the strengths that we built through it? What were some challenges that we faced? What was the impact of it? And just how are we envisioning the way forward with any sort of bridge curriculum or accelerated learning curriculum? We'll start off with the first 2. That's my role as a moderator here today. And then a majority of the time we will spend hearing from our teachers who actually used this curriculum in their classrooms. Quickly then, this is something that we've seen over the last 2 years, right? Because of the pandemic, because of 60+ weeks of just disrupted school learning, and this number varies for different regions in our country, but India was still among one of those countries that faced the longest durations of school closures across the globe. What that meant for us was also that students who were not learning all year, and this is just 1 year if we're considering of learning loss, in order for them to catch up with their original sort of academic trajectory, it would take up until 2030. And this is with the assumption that we go back 100% to the way we were pre-pandemic, right? Which we're currently seeing that that's not happening, right? It's really challenging to go back to exactly how things were in terms of the learning hours, the quality of learning, in terms of the aids that our children are able to access day in, day out, which is where your accelerated learning and bridge curricula come in, right? So even with the 20% accelerated learning curriculum, grades 3 to 6 would sort of, that time that they need to catch up with their original academic trajectory would have been reduced by 3 years. So I think just pausing here to share that the purpose of building a bridge curriculum and implementing it was incredibly clear to us, stepping into the pandemic and just the blended learning world. But what we also did, and the team at Teach for India that actually designed this curriculum spent a bit of time exploring in the past, whenever children have faced learning losses, what has actually worked in getting them back on there. And 3 principles came out across all effective bridge curricula. And I want everybody to just anchor the rest of the half an hour in this, which is 1, that this curriculum needs to prioritize and reduce content. The idea is not to say, let's do everything that we've missed out on. We will not compromise on anything. We'll just do it really fast. That's not something that works, right? So the idea is to prioritize and do and focus on only those skills, knowledge, mindsets that actually children need to move forward into the next grades. Yeah. Second was just increasing learning time. So no matter what
in a blended way, asynchronous, synchronous, whatever way possible, can we optimize every single learning minute that our children actually can access once schools reopen or even in small groups, right? And that brings me to the third one. This is a really important principle, which is just small group instruction. Our children are currently at a place where the more focused and one-on-one attention they receive, the better and faster they are able to learn, right? So that is one of the principles that we tried to integrate into the design itself, where we said, hey, here are parts of the curriculum that you can just delegate to volunteers. Here are parts of the curriculum that you can just hand over to student leaders in your classroom who can walk others through it, right? So that was the idea. The first two principles we will talk about through the curriculum itself. And the second one, Teach for India actually implemented a volunteer program where we got in a lot more hands on deck. So every classroom had not just one teacher, but additional people to look out for them to facilitate learning for different buckets. Lastly, here's what the curriculum looked like. And this is a broad overview. There were 3 parts of the bridge curriculum. The first one was just social-emotional learning. I know you've already all discussed and gone over a little bit of just why it was important to cater to well-being, student well-being throughout the couple of years, but that's a resource bank that we actually provided to our fellows. For the language curriculum, we actually created 3 sets, and set A, B, C denote actually different reading levels. So based on readiness that our children had, that our readers in different classrooms had, we encouraged our fellows to use different sets. So our most struggling readers were using set A, whereas our slightly more ready readers were using set C. That was the progression. Lastly, under mathematics also, we had 3 sort of sets, and we had partnered with an external organization to outsource this. And we had grade 2, 4, and 7 curricula. What that meant was we had domain-wise activities and tasks assigned to this. And based on how much skills have attrition for a particular learner in terms of math, we encouraged fellows to map instruction. Lastly, I'm going to go over some choices that we made, and then I'm going to ask questions, a primary question to the rest of you. So folks, handing it over to you in a minute. But 4 big things that we did to make sure that bridge was something that was definitely efficient and effective towards student outcomes and learning in the pandemic was 1, diagnosing and prioritizing skills. Yeah, tied to one of our first principles. We didn't say we would do everything. Under a literacy, for example, if there is a particular question type our students are struggling with, then we only focused on repeatedly actually practicing that through our curriculum. Second one was instruction at the right level. So we did not say all teachers in grade 4 pick up set A or pick up grade 4 curriculum. We said, hey, identify students in your classrooms who actually need one kind of instruction and then go according to that. So our bridge curriculum was designed to actually do differentiation in the classroom. Third was just leveraging every minute of the week. We also tried to sort of train our fellows on how do we plan for a week when it comes to such a complex type of differentiation, even with operations of it, right? And lastly, just leveraging volunteers and other stakeholders. We very consciously went into this knowing it's not just up to the teacher alone to sort of navigate the whole complexity. Those were some choices that we made. We're now going to get into the most important part, which is hearing from all of you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to request you all to just share with our audience here. How are you looking back now at the year? What would you say has been one of the biggest learning in terms of just implementing this bridge curriculum? Implementing, if we sort of move away from the specifics, implementing any sort of accelerated learning program. What has been your learning? And second, what has been the impact of it for your children, right? You know the gaps that they came in with. Where are they now is what I'd love to know. And Aparna, I'm going to invite you first. What I'd love for you to share with the group is also just, you teach a grade 2 classroom. So what kind of gaps were you seeing? And how did the principle of just small group instruction actually play out in your classroom? We'd love to hear from you in terms of that.
Hi, Gayatri. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on board. So to begin with, the first question that you spoke about was, sorry, what were some of the biggest learnings looking back at the year from implementing a curriculum like this? I think it's tied to what you brought up about small group learning. I think the effectiveness of small group learning and in differentiated groups, which fundamental to the principle of bridge, meeting the students where they're at, has been the biggest learning for me. Having an open access curriculum where I did not have to compromise the high rigor students from just reaching grade level and pushing them further, while also catering to students who are struggling with the very basics, I think has been what I would see as the biggest impact and my biggest learning from where we started. So like you said, I teach a grade 2 class. So effectively, a lot of my students, this was the first time they were in a formal learning space, right? From coming to a class and learning, like the first few lessons were just like, ABCs, to getting to a place in terms of impact where I would say we have almost 85% of the class are at grade level, are reading at their grade level right now. And we have a few students who are reading at grade 4 level and grade 3 level, where that is where I think the impact in literacy would lie. In terms of math, I think being able to cater to them based on the kind of learners they are. So where you have visual learners and auditory learners and verbal learners, creating material for them separately is also something I've seen from the bridge curriculum. Seeing the different types of worksheets and basing my means of assessing the very same objective or skill that we are trying to sort of instruct or imbibe in the children, using these different means that cater to their type of learning, I think has been something that I've really learned from and has caused impact in our classroom. Now, when I talk about small group learning, I think especially with my lowest trigger bucket, blended learning really came in for this particular aspect, because like you said, we had to maximize learning time. And from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, the students were in school and they were part of the exact same classroom, even though we tried to do a little bit of differentiation as far as possible. But leveraging volunteers post that in situations, let's say like 4 to 5 in the evening, or maybe 45-minute 2-hour classes or 2 classes a week, for example, and planning them in a way that would lead to more outputs in the class. So for example, if I have to give you a very simple example of how this worked, when my lowest trigger bucket had a class with their volunteer, we would try to approach it in the way that you leverage the methods that they're familiar with to teach them a new skill, right? And for example, it would be, I'm showing them a picture and I'm saying, describe this picture, right? With the volunteer. So we start with describing the picture, and in the process, we pick up new words, which will eventually be part of the lesson or the story we'll be reading in the next 2 days. So they are coming in prepped, not even though they didn't know the word or know how to read it, they're coming in prepped with how to tackle that story because they're familiar with these words. In this, another aspect that helped was mapping volunteers accordingly in very small groups. So I am somebody who started leveraging volunteers very late into my first year, and that is something I really want to do in my second year, is to mapping them in a way that really met student needs. Meetings, like pushing student learning and meeting the child where they're at, also requires us to cater our learning experience in a way that meets their needs. And one thing I really did here was language. I had Tamil speaking volunteers mapped to students who spoke Tamil at home. And what that meant was that these students did not have to learn to comprehend a new language in a new language. They learned English through Tamil. And I think that was something that turned out extremely effective for our classroom as well. So I think that's briefly, I hope I touched upon everything you asked me to.
Absolutely did. Thank you so much for sharing that, Aparna. So what I'm hearing is just a very nuanced understanding of who is learning at what level and what are some strengths that are available in my ecosystem right now, whether it is my volunteers, whether it is me, whether it is my children. How am I leveraging that to sort of maximize learning? That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Riddhi, I'm going to also ask you to step in here. And I know you're on the other end of the spectrum. You teach grade 8. So your students sort of came in with very different kinds of gaps, right? There is also that added pressure of syllabus completion and coverage that was there, which you were running with from the very beginning. So if I were to ask you, how did you actually navigate differentiation, and how did you involve your students in actually making decisions about what they want to learn and how to spend time in a way that it's getting maximized? Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely listening to Aparna because her experience was so different from mine with the same curriculum exactly. So as you said, I teach 8th grade, and then when I joined the class at the beginning of this academic year, a lot of my kids were at an RC level of like 1 or 1.5, which basically means they were reading at grade 3, grade 4 level, right? And the reality is, as a teacher, it's terrifying, right? You know what is in store for them in the 9th and 10th grade. It's overwhelming for students as well, because by the time they're in the 8th grade, they have that level of self-awareness to know I am not ready. I'm not where I'm supposed to be right now, right? They're seeing their peers, they're seeing what is coming for them. And so there can be that sense of, there's no point in trying, right? I'm never going to be able to cover up this kind of immense gap that has happened in my learning. So like when I reflect on how bridge curriculum played a role in our classroom, I think the biggest thing that it did was shift this mindset, right? It showed the children this very clear pathway that literacy can be broken down into these few structured like components. If you follow it, if you do your RC, if you do vocab, if you do grammar writing every single week, you can get there, right? There is a way for you to cover up that learning loss that has happened. So I think, yeah, in terms of impact, that's something that played a very big role with my kids. Also, working with 8th grade was a little bit different in this sense, because as you said, they were doing the same curriculum that, for instance, Aparna's kids were doing, right? And it can get challenging for a child to be developmentally much further ahead than what their reading level is. So I think something that helped a lot in that sense was just partnering with students, talking to them, explaining the curriculum to them. I still remember this one online class I had where I screen shared the entire bridge curriculum with them. I walked them through the different structures. I showed them, they asked me questions on why is this here? What does this do? And it just made the whole process a lot more transparent, right? It showed them that there is a purpose to what we are doing. There is an end goal in mind. And what it also allowed them to do is just exercise that extra bit of agency and say, you know what, this part of the curriculum is not necessary for me. As a teacher, I wanted to do every single thing for them, but it's not what they needed, right? There were some children who were very good with reading fluency. They just needed help with writing and framing answers. So giving them that extra bit of voice and saying, you tell me out of this curriculum, out of this entire rich resource, what is it that you really need in order to move ahead, right? So I think that's something that really helped our classroom, because it showed them that the bridge curriculum is not about moving them that 0.5 level ahead. It's not about that. It's about accelerating their learning to a point where they are taking control, right? They are taking control of what is missing right now in their learning and what they actually need in order to be ready for further grades. So I think that's something that worked for our class.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Riddhi. I think something that gets largely missed in this conversation of learning loss and a voice that is not usually heard is of our students, right? I think a lot of us we listen to experts, we listen to just curriculum designers, trainers like myself talk about, hey, here's what needs to happen. But I really love the way you also brought in just voice and agency to say, actually, the primary stakeholders have the most amount of control here. And that's what we are envisioning for our students as well. That was beautiful. Moving on to a little bit of just what we learned as teachers and the skills that we built, along with the skills that our students built. So Shreya, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about just your classroom. I want to hear two things. I'd love for you to share just, you have a classroom of 126 students. And so just you made a choice there to not differentiate, but to actually do homogeneous instruction, right? So what was the impact of that and what are you seeing play out in your classroom now, a year down the line? Along with that, just a little bit of what were some skills that you built as a teacher and your students have built over the year of using bridge curriculum, which they otherwise would not have if you just envision a normal regular year without bridge. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was lovely to hear from everyone. And coming to your question, Gayatri. So yes, I teach 126 grade 7 children. I teach literacy and social. So just to give a little more background, I have children who are able to confidently read and comprehend a grade 8 or even 9 text to children who are not able to make complete sense of a grade 1 text also. So with that in mind, the kind of impact I think Bridge has done. So for me, when I started with Bridge curriculum itself, given the classroom, I have two classrooms that are divided into two sections. So we do not have more place to have a separate section or to change the classrooms into more homogeneous grouping for the two sections itself. So in each of these two sections, there are kids with the varied learning levels, reading levels that I spoke about. So given that, I was not able to give, I could have given set B to children who are able to read a grade level text, but I was not able to do that. For me personally, it was difficult to manage a huge class. And although there were volunteers assigned, but their contribution would come in later. Like they would not be able to come to the class, take physical classes with the children itself. And I do have volunteers now, but not able to obviously sit in the entire class and teach as a fellow would do. So what did help rather is that I chose like a set B, the middle rigor paper for all the children, and I've had a heterogeneous setup in a class where a child who's not able to read properly, like a child who can read up grade level 1 or 2 text, is sitting with a child who can read grade 7 text. So they're all sitting in these heterogeneous groups. They're all helping each other. So I really saw collaboration come alive over the last few months beautifully, where a child who is weak, I mean, children, they are very aware of their own learning levels. They're aware that a child is able to read better than them. And they're not shy to ask, which is something I've realized. I mean, they're a little shy, of course, there'll be small disruptions here and there, but from that collaboration, they've helped each other. They've built that skill of reading and comprehending. The other skill, which is something that they've thankfully built over the last few months, is just annotating and making their reading and comprehension alive. So the annotations, when I talk about annotations, annotating for a character whenever they see a person or a character in a story, character feelings, for character actions, for making connections. All these things, they've internalized it so well that now if I teach a social lesson also, they're able to remember those skills and they're just doing that. The biggest achievement, like the biggest impact, I would say, is where very recently I'm able to see my low rigor kids also doing these particular annotations really, really well. So that is the kind of skills they have built, and that this is something they'll carry forward in every lesson of theirs. I'm reading a text, I keep forgetting, okay, I have to annotate for a character, but there are children who are pointing out, Didi, there's a character. So that's the kind of skills they have caught up and the impact we've created through Bridge. Thank you so much. I hope that answers both your questions. Thank you.
Absolutely does. Thank you for sharing that. I think what I'm just hearing from you is the transferability of it, right? There was a lag because of the learning loss that we faced, where our children were they took that time to pick up those skills again, because there was that attrition, there was sort of loss, right? That's the word we've been using. But I love that we're pointing now towards a sort of learning or method where we're saying, hey, it takes time. Once they pick that up, they're actually able to do it across, be that content, be that just rigor of topics that they're looking at. And what that means, what that implies for them is that now their learning will be much faster, right? And that's the whole idea of bridging or accelerating learning. So thank you for sharing that. Meghla, I'm gonna head on over to you and actually ask you to share, as a teacher, what were some things that you actually saw yourself doing and growing with? And how did you sort of contextualize the curriculum? Because a lot of times what happens is when ready curricula or resources come in to a teacher's hands, it's really easy to sort of get disoriented by the mismatch, right? So sometimes the curriculum wants you to do some things and you are really not seeing that happening or playing out in your classroom. So as a teacher, how did you make those decisions is what I'd love to know. Yeah.
Thank you, Gayatri, for that question. Yeah, I'll just go on. I think I'll start off by just mentioning some things that I learned, and then, move on to the next question. So with the curriculum, considering context, my class had some requirements for Hindi and Marathi since they were compulsory subjects. So those teachers also had their particular timings that had to be taken by those teachers. There was also state curriculum that had to be completed for the unit tests and the terminal exams. So it wasn't easy to just implement a curriculum. There was, along with contextualizing that curriculum itself for my kids to make it more easier for them to understand, I think it was also very important to incorporate so many other factors into that curriculum for my kids, right? Again, everyone's contexts are so different. So just getting into the curriculum and changing it as much as I can to suit the needs of my kids, right? So I think in that sense, what I learned as a teacher is to take the curriculum and to contextualize it. To contextualize it as much as I can and make it ready and easy to use for each of my kids. The thing is, I have 3 buckets in my class. I have my low and rigor budget, my middle, and my high. So within those also, I have buckets of kids, like Aparna mentioned, the kids who have different needs and different ways of learning. So how do I cater to each of my kids with just one curriculum and one framework, right? So what I learned as a teacher was to incorporate my vision document, the bridge curriculum, to make it a lot more holistic. I think that is something I have learned over this year, to bring about a lot of elements like SVS also into this, to bring in, one thing that really, something that I do a lot is like tweak the plan to work for my unit, because most of the texts that are there in the curriculum sometimes don't align with what I want to actually teach my kids in that week or that month. And it's probably not something I want to touch right now, but maybe next month. So this just how to adjust and adapt and be flexible with that, in that sense. So to just sit with the entire curriculum and to compartmentalize each bit. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Meghla. What I'm hearing is just like, as a teacher, my decision making and judgment actually is getting much, much stronger. And I'm able to say, prioritize, I'm able to map different pieces of the curriculum and resources that are available to me with different needs that I have in my classroom. And I saw you doing a much more nuanced way of differentiation than most teachers, right? Which is not just readiness, but also like styles of learning or interests that my students have. So further dividing it into that and catering through content. I think what I would love to sort of segue into, and as we're closing, we're coming to the last few minutes of our discussion, right? Something that we know now is that switching to online and offline is going to be a permanent sort of part of our lives as educators and as students over the next few years, right? And so bridging gaps is going to also be a constant, and it's going to be one of the most key skills that any teacher builds, that any curriculum designer also works towards in the coming years, and which was not the case before, right? So it's new for all of us. Accelerated learning curricula are new for all of us. So if I were to ask each one of you to take turns and actually just share, if you were to share any non-negotiables or absolutely key things to keep in mind for either a teacher, for school leaders who want to implement sort of bridge programs in their schools, for trainers of educators, for managers, for people who are working just in making school infrastructure better through the pandemic, what would you tell them about bridge programs, and what would you ask them to keep in mind as they're sort of walking into next year? Yeah. So whoever wants to start can actually go for it, and then we'll take turns, close out.
Can I go ahead? Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I think one non-negotiable with regard to bridge curriculum would be the content itself. It's levelized to suit the reading level of the child. So that's very, very important, because that's the whole idea of like the bridge curriculum itself. And I have really seen that work wonders in my class. So a child who is I'll give a few examples. There are children, my lower girl children, they are obviously low in confidence. They know that they're not able to read the text. They're always going to depend on the higher girl kids. But when I give them a text that they can read, that they can make sense of, I can see pure joy in their faces, and I can see their desire to learn, their willingness to learn increase with that. And they're automatically going to stay focused on the lesson. They also have that confidence, small confidence build is what they're getting from that text itself. So levelized text is a non-negotiable.
Amazing. So just teaching at the level of where our students are. Yes, challenging them is important, but like that early success, if we're able to show them that early success, then we have sort of that investment and that buy-in into the curriculum itself. Beautiful. Thank you, Shreya. Riddhi, do you want to go next?
Sure. I agree. I mean, I think what Shreya said is really like the foundation of what Bridge works on. So I think that's a very important first. But I would also say that the curriculum should always have room for the teacher and the classroom together to experiment with it, right? To alter it, modify it, adapt it to whatever suits them, whatever suits their needs at the moment. So I think also when you are given a resource, knowing that it is up to you, right, to make of it whatever is going to work magic in your classroom. I think that's something that's again a non-negotiable. I think there are a lot of great resources out there, but knowing which resource to apply to which student, in what manner, at what time, right? I think that's where that real impact starts to happen. So I would say that.
Thanks, Riddhi and Shreya. If I can go now. I'll try to keep this very brief, but I think three very important things, I think, when you think about bridge learning. One, I think for sure, small group learning. The effectiveness of having small groups discuss, learn from each other, be it heterogeneous or homogeneous, depending on the need of the time. Small group learning, I think, is something very fundamental. Secondly, I think understanding that at the end of the day, an accelerated learning curriculum focuses on skill building. So that allows you to also not compromise on syllabus completion to some extent. I understand it's not a blanket situation, but picking out skills that you want the children to learn and trying to match it to your syllabus requirements is something I think is very fundamental to bridge learning, given the other sort of constraints that we function under as teachers in working with a particular board. And thirdly, I would say not compromising on SEL. I think Bridge SEL is something, socio-emotional learning is something I have really leveraged in my classroom, because it's not enough for us to do effective learning. It's also important for us to create a conducive learning environment for this learning to come to fruition and to have outcomes. So I think these are the three things that I think are fundamental to bridge learning, which I would definitely want everyone, including myself, to keep in mind all the time. Thank you. Over to you, Meghla.
Gayatri, it's okay if it's time up. All right. So I had a point very related to Aparna, but I'll just go with another, which is a balanced literacy week or balanced literacy. I feel like all the elements of literacy are very important in the child's life when they are bridging a gap or even otherwise, because I feel like through my experience as a teacher and seeing all of my kids and their outcomes, I feel like the real growth has happened when the kids have been exposed and have been doing each element of literacy, right? Neglecting one element can show in many ways in literacy. So I just feel like if all elements are there in the week, I think it's optimal level growth. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for adding that, Meghla, and for Aparna and Riddhi for sharing. We're absolutely on the dot, but I'm really, really grateful that you shared your learning with all of us here today, including me. I'm taking away so much. But yeah, with that, Anu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri, for sharing the principles and design of Bridge curriculum and for facilitating this wonderful panel. And thank you, Riddhi, Meghla, Shreya, and Aparna for sharing your experiences and learnings with implementing the curriculum. To close out day 2 of inspirED, we now welcome Irfan Kalani, founder of Code to Enhance Learning Trust. Irfan empowers schools to bring coding to kids by supporting them with curriculum and training teachers. Welcome, Irfan. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anu. I think it was a wonderful discussion, that we had right now. Just learning about what kind of different resources we could have, so that there is not an incremental growth, but we start leapfrogging. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you are able to see it. Hello. Can you hear me as well? Okay, great. Firstly, thank you. Hello.
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you and we can see you as well.
Super, great. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me here for taking this closing of the wonderful day 2 of inspirED. I think yesterday we were talking about what are certain areas where school and schooling is getting affected. And today it was a wonderful day where we thought about that how we are going to rebuild the future, and it's not going to be just coming back to the norm, but going beyond it, because the norm was not something very inspiring for us. And the another part was which was very exciting, which was about what your purpose or how you are going to see yourself when we are going to rebuild this future. So I think we went through a number of different sessions and speakers, and there were a lot of information which was given to us, very wonderful. But I think I would love to have a practice, or we could start this closing by just 30 seconds of maybe meditation, or just just breathing in and out and going through all the things that we had from 4 p.m. up till now. And maybe then we could use the chat box to share about our experience. So yeah, let's take 30 seconds. And you can keep your eyes open, feel the joy. You can keep your eyes closed as well. Okay, we'll come back in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I hope this would have given you a chance to come back with all the memories and try to be in present. Maybe bring your core again in the center. And moving ahead, it was a very wonderful day. We started with the session about widening, the widened gap by Rutuja and Ria, where there were certain disheartening statistics which were presented to us. I saw in one of the chat box, it was written that the statistic around corporal punishment, it was really disheartening to see that, and I was able to echo with it. But with that, we started also moving towards how now we are going to bridge this immense gap which COVID has created, and which was already there in our classrooms. And I just shared in the beginning as well that now it's not just the time which I picked from the whole conversation or the lecture that we had of incremental growth, but how we can start having leapfrogging, which is a very research based thing, which has I have read about it. And I think the another thing was how much it is important to bring all the stakeholders together, and it's going to be a task which we all have to do it together. Then we moved ahead and saw something about how the rural India and the urban India are trying to do different things or different strategies they have used. where one of the things which I really liked was about using Doordarshan and Akashvani. It was one of the uh, highly resourceful ways to reach out to children when they were not having access to digital devices. As we moved ahead, we saw there were two wonderful fellows. They shared their story about how they have started working with the preschoolers in an environment where they were not physically present with the children and virtually reaching out to them. I felt it was one of the courageous and very inspiring thing to go and work with toddlers. We know how they are and how much amount of patience we need to have. And in the end, there were wonderful conversation we had with Gayatri and the team about amazing strategies, which I think people could, if available in open domain, could take out into their classrooms and see that how differentiated learning could be done in the classroom. And again, it's not about just that incremental step-by-step growth, but how we could have accelerated learning in the classroom. So with that, the whole day, I would love to hear something about what was one thing that really touched your heart in the day two of the inspirED. And you can use the chat box, or maybe you can write it in the YouTube text box, which is there, and I would be reading out your experiences. If someone could help me in the yeah. So I think one of the things someone has written it down, that the sessions were really insightful. Yeah, they were really insightful. Bridging the gap, rural and urban India, how can we strike a balance? Because there are so many people living in the rural areas as well, so there is a need to strike a balance between the different geographies that we work in. Thank you, Vijay Lakshmi, for sharing your thoughts. Elizabeth, different ideas to engage parents and innovations in rural and urban India. Yup. Chaitra, all the sessions were very informative, and we are really grateful to all the speakers for creating this kind of a content, which made us feel really happy and has given us certain steps where we could move ahead. Yeah, so Bala, for me also, this was one thing which really touched, where I saw the girl having the solar panel and the project and just carrying it with so much hope and maybe joy, what she has created. Moving ahead, I would love to hear read out all the responses, but I think in the interest of time, there's one more question I have for you. For me, just talking about the things which really touched me is one of the things which Bala shared. And the another thing which I have already talked about, just being resourceful and using Akashvani, Doordarshan to disseminate the learning, and just not stopping to what challenges were thrown at us. So this is really inspiring for me, and it really touched my heart today. Just because one of the things we were talking about, that how what role people are going to play in rebuilding the future right now. So I would love to hear about how your understanding of your role to rebuild the education system right now has evolved, or maybe if there are any certain areas where you feel it got reinforced, maybe you had it before and just the conviction in it has increased a lot. So I would love if you could share this in the chat box as well, and I would be happy to read it out. Ganesh has previously written, thriving is important for children. Yes. Juma Roy has written, I don't know, if this is the response to the previous question, but children are more capable than we think. And we have seen time and time when, there are challenging situations, children have come up with that fighting spirit and has, left us all with that awe, that how come, these young children are doing, so much. I'll wait for more responses. Dr. Shobha Bharat has written that immense efforts to ensure the holistic development of children, innovative approaches to meet the unique needs of children. Yeah, I think it's going to be very important now that we start talking about the innovation, which is going to come in, because there is a big opportunity right now with the challenges that we are facing. Yogita has written, can't ignore any elements of learning. Thank you very much, Yogita, for sharing. Risha has written, remedies and discussions on student issues by students themselves. Super. And I would love to hear more about, is there anything about your role where you feel after the day two, what role you are going to play? Has it evolved now? Are there any things which has, where your conviction has increased a lot after going through the day two experience? And I can wait for another 1 or 2 response and maybe then move ahead. Anuradha has written, learning happens with collaboration with things that help students to become independent learners. Super. And I think that's the crux of it, no? You can't make a horse drink water, but just you can take it near the water. And I feel it's very important for us to make them realize, or maybe create those situations which helps them to be the independent learner. So I think that's the place, or that's the gray area where we need to figure out more, that how children could become independent learners. I think the last chat we have is of Chaitra. One thing which is important to rebuild the education system is going back to basics, sure, and help the child of any grade to bring back or to get back their confidence. Super nice. And I think I was reading somewhere, after such emergencies or which is related to health, there is so much of social emotional issues which crop in. And I think to build back the confidence so that children can keep learning more, I think it's important to get their confidence back. For me, I have written down 3 things. That understanding of the ecosystem is really important, and there is a need to work with the ecosystem to create a solution. I think one of the things which I would have loved more is that how the innovations which are coming up can be data oriented, research oriented, and the impact is also shown so that others are able to learn through it, and it doesn't become some kind of a speculation, and which is going to be very important for us. I just wanted to share one thing, that recently we have written a white paper for Code to Enhance Learning, where I work, which is more about that how coding or technology or hackathons could help in building 21st century skills, and it would be available on our website. So where we have collected 2 years of data and how children have grown through different design thinking or collaborative or computational thinking skills. So we have tried to see the impact of around 25 to 30 children. And the last thing is just operating with love and hope, because I feel I keep sharing and learning more about that, how much like, when we are sowing seeds, love and hope is important for them to like, grow more. Tomorrow we are going to come back for day 3, which is going to be very inspiring, where the idea is more about how social, physical, mental well-being of our children and designing a sustainable and effective learning environment. Now it is important for us, seeing the gap, like, which is even widened up. And we have amazing speakers with us, who is going to talk going beyond the basics. Rishikesh is an associate professor who would be like, taking us through the session. And I love that there is a mix of different things happening where we are talking about social emotional learning through arts, through sports, and how like, it looks like in the conflicted areas. Yeah, so it seems a very exciting day tomorrow. And I would love and would request you, all of you, to like, to join in for the day 3. Moving ahead, I'll just leave you with the 2 thoughts I had. I think the first one is the lines which Bhavna Pandey, like, shared during her session, that nayi umeed se roshan naya savera ho, और हर किसी के मन में हो. I loved this poetry, and also in such a movement, like there is a quote from there's a dialogue from a film called Shawshank Redemption, which is hope is a good thing, and maybe the best of the things, and no good thing is like, ever going to die. So with that hope, among like, this gap which has been created, we live with the idea of rebuilding the future. And I think we can come back tomorrow to hear more what our speakers have in their bucket. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.